The Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It's Friday, April 3rd, 2015. I'm Doug Hagmann in the studio with my son, fellow investigator, fellow researcher Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you for your continued belief and trust in us as we look at these events taking place today, all of the news headlines, and attempt to wade through the fog of misinformation and deliberate disinformation as well. To get to the real truth of the matter, and that's what we are attempting to do tonight. Tonight, we have a very special show planned for you at the bottom of this hour. Joining us will be Nathan Leal of Watchman'sCry.com, a regular guest, but he's come up with his research has been he's been researching just quite a bit about numerous issues, including and especially the military exercises that are going to be taking place on U.S. soil. Now, you can go a number of different ways on that. You can go from the very far, hey, everything is normal, it's been going on for a number of years, just relax, to the all the way to the other side of the spectrum, and this is the end kind of thing, and everything's just it's starting. Okay, now we think that there's much more to it than that. It's not as simple as either or, and there is a reason for this. And the information that we're going to be citing, that Nathan's going to be citing, is found in our own nation's documents. And this is something that we have to take a very close, hard look at. You're going to be hearing terms like, or phrases like, human domain. And you're going to have to think out of the box a little bit in terms of programming. Programming for what is to come. But having said that, for our new listeners, thank you for tuning in, deliberately tuning in tonight. And for our veteran listeners, we really appreciate you hanging with us. Now, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern, and we're simulcast by the good graces of the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at thehagmanandhagmanreport.com. Our home base is hagmanandhagman.com. I just want to say that very proud to mention that this show, in part, is sponsored by Nature Box. Nature Box ships great tasting, guilt-free snacks right to your door. They've got over 100 flavors to choose from, like Asiago and cheddar cheese crisps. Oh, my goodness. Big Island pineapple. They've got cranberry medley, pistachio power clusters, dark cocoa almonds. Oh, what a great combination that is. And you know what? You'll never get bored of snacking again. Not with these flavors. Not with the plan that they've got. So you can, try Nature Box for free by going to naturebox.com/CFP-radio. Alternatively, you can go to hagmanandhagman.com, scroll all the way down to the bottom there, click on the Nature Box link. It'll take you right to our little world at Nature Box, and there you can get your free trial box. It's great. So that's naturebox.com/CFP-radio or hagmanandhagman.com, all the way down at the bottom, and click on the link. Joe, great to have you.
Glad to be here.
Friday.
Interesting. I had to get my scuba equipment to get to my desk.
Yeah, it's raining out there, boy.
No, we had some water issues in the studio today. Computers, some equipment got ruined, and of course it's a holiday weekend and nobody's available to come out until Monday. So it's been a rough day for my dad. Didn't call me, tell me that when he got here that the studio had water in it, and
it wasn't that bad. Look, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. It was just some things that stuff happens, right? It's all right. But I spared you.
It's going to be a great show tonight. Nathan will be calling in here in about 20-25 minutes. I want to say a special hello and premature happy birthday to Mary out there, whose birthday is tomorrow, April 4th, and this is also the eve of the third blood moon in the tetrad. The fourth and final blood moon will be on the 28th of September of this year. But tonight and tomorrow morning, we will be able to, depending on where you are in the country, view the blood moon. Now, I just watched a quick there's a link on Drudge that goes to a USA Today article where they give a brief video description of the blood moon, and they said anywhere west of the Mississippi River will be able to see the eclipse entirely. On the east side, it will be the sunrise will hinder the eclipse and the ability to see the whole eclipse. But yeah, our third blood moon in this tetrad, which has been the point of discussion for many people in the prophecy world, and don't expect anything to happen, overnight, but definitely is grabbing the attention of people as these blood moons continue to be at the top of places like Drudge and Fox News and USA Today. You get your paper tomorrow morning, and I wouldn't be surprised if most papers didn't have the blood moon as their top headline.
Well, I don't. Look, we just have to look at these, in my view, anyway. And as we have talked to so many people, so many biblical, experts in biblical prophecy, who've written so many books. I mean, we've talked to everyone from Mark Biltz to who wrote the book about the blood moons, to Jonathan Cahn. You name them. We've interviewed them, talked to them, and they're all quick to say, look, don't expect. Number one, don't expect a lot of coverage about this, mainstream-wise, and number two, don't expect necessarily anything to happen right away. It's this is a phase or a period of time. Perhaps this is indicative of something that's yet to come. And
on the eve of this blood moon, we have, and it's also the end of a quarter, we have new jobs numbers that have come out. The Fed has chopped the growth forecast to 0. The GDP Now model aggregates that, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta has reported that its forecast for the U.S. gross domestic product, the GDP, dropped to 0 on April 1st and ticked back up to 0.1% on the 2nd. The bank uses a unique model called GDP Now to prepare its forecast, and the model typically estimates growth well below the rate projected by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Now, they go on to say that here's what the numbers came out to be. Record 93,175,000 Americans are not working.
Yeah.
Not in labor force. It is it says exceeded 93 million for first time. 62.7% of labor force participation matches 37-year low. The number of Americans 16 years and older who did not participate in the labor force, meaning they neither had a job nor actively sought one, in the last 4 weeks rose to 93,175,000 in March. Now let me go read that sentence again. The number of Americans 16 years or older who did not participate, meaning they're not working, nor are seeking work, 93 million.
That's right. Well, the totality the number of Americans out of work far exceeds any legitimate or any numbers from these so-called legitimate sources, and I think Shadow Stats perhaps has the best handle on the percentage of unemployed persons, and they're pegging it at around 20, just under 25%. So 1 out of 4. That's a significant number, and the reason you're not seeing anything, you're not seeing the effects of this or the evidence of this, is because of the EBT cards. The bread lines have been replaced by the covert EBT cards, or the cards that are you get in the mail, and state programs, federal programs. So once that is cut off, and I do believe it will, I think you're going to see some pretty serious domestic issues, and it's got to be cut off because at some point, or at least reset, cut off for a period. Don't you think, Joe? I mean, it's got to collapse and then be rebuilt. before it. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but the rebuild part is the part where, one can only hope. To continue and finish with the job numbers, it goes on to say that the U.S. added 126,000 jobs in March versus the expected 245,000 jobs. Jobless rate somehow stays at 5.5%, even though we have, 5.5%. What would you just say? Over 1/4 of the people that accounted for 1/4 and 93 million.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a realistic, real world scenario.
Right. So think about that. The actual job numbers from the government are that 93 million Americans are not working nor seeking work. The jobless rate they claim, though, is at 5.5%.
Right.
Our population is less than 350 million. Do the math.
Yeah. Look, I got to tell you, we are. My question is, who believes this? I mean, those who are paying attention, who believes this?
Yeah, and you have to look at, we have the people who work in accountants, economists. We have in government and private sector. Why are we not seeing more headlines, or maybe are people not paying it that much attention, or is it just so far and few between that the truth is actually told, where they can go on mainstream media on all networks and outlets and state that our population is about 350 million people, can state that almost 100 million of those people are not working, and then give a jobless rate less than 10% and get away with it? I mean, well, you understand what I'm trying to say? Is it that easy to? Are the people lulled to sleep so swiftly by?
Well, and this is what we're going to be talking about tonight too with Nathan Leal. You've got to look at what's really going on in terms of programming, mental programming, neuro-linguistic programming. And this really struck me, and I think that the programming has gone into high gear, especially of late. When I say programming, I'm talking about the words and phrases that are used in the mainstream media, and even by some of the majority of the talking heads in TV and on the radio. They're spouting the same things, using the same phrases. Well, where do these phrases originate? And if you follow the trail back, you would see that it goes back to the 6 primary corporations owning the media, and then but it doesn't stop there. Where did it really originate? Well, you've got historical documentation and historical confirmation. The CIA has people inside every media organization in America, and if you look at that rogue CIA element, you can trace that back to various groups, and one of the primary groups would be the Tavistock Institute, and it's American branches, I should say, for the American media, and then of course, out of the UK, there you've got an entirely different and even stronger picture. But having said all that, we're being programmed, and it's like being in a trance almost, where people are not getting, or they're accepting these numbers, it's almost as if you could, Joe, you could be watching TV, the average person that's unaware and unawake, and through this mind programming, that they would say something like, well, I don't know, UFO landed on the White House lawn. And no one would question that. No one would, I mean, sure, there would be curiosity and there would be some reaction, but no one would question the legitimacy or the accuracy or even the intent or what's behind it. It's just okay, so we have an alien race landing on the White House lawn. Okay, I get that, and the acceptance is just without asking any questions. Or I mean, look at the numbers. Who in their right mind can really accept what the government's putting out? Seriously, yet we do. Or even worse, we say, well, we know it's a lie, but what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? Well, we have to start doing something about it. We have to start questioning this. We have to start saying, no, don't tell me a lie. Don't lie to me. Tell me the truth. But as the program states, you can't handle the truth. Not you, our audience, but the American government, to the American people, you can't handle the truth, so we have to lie to you. And I believe that's how they get away with. They justify their actions, because if we told you the truth, it'd be devastating and it would cause panic, and oh my goodness, at least with the economy and other things. But look at what's going on here with. You mentioned the blood moons coming out of the program, and I really think that's a good observation. Look at what's going on domestically and worldwide. Look at the Iranian agreement. Look at the Middle East on fire. Look at everything that's going on. And you know what really is something that I think is worth noting? Much of this could have been stopped. Now, this isn't all Obama's problem. Obama himself he's not the sole perpetrator of what's taking place. He's the face. He's the front man. And some people around him that were brought in around him. But still, he had to get in. He had to get a foothold to the office. So I turn around and I look at all the people back in 2008 who failed to vet this man, or to those who did vet this man, the media, the right wing, even the conservative media, saying, "Oh, no, it's a distraction. Don't question his eligibility. That's a distraction." Well, had we done so and really paid attention to the rule of law, the constitutional rule of law, perhaps we could have slowed this train wreck down a bit.
Yeah, I mean, we can take that back to the Constitution even being our current, law of the land, and arguing, whether the Constitution is even valid in today's society that we live in.
Well, Jade Helm, I mean, doesn't the Constitution have anything about our military?
Well, that was taken away by Bush.
True.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is the.
But by precedent, not by order.
Just as Satan, through subtlety and incrementalism, has come into the church and taken away the focus and the distracted Christians from the Lord to different, comforts and vices, so has the government done the same, and Satan done the same in the government in our country, slowly taking away laws that were, supposed to be the laws of this land. And I say, does the Constitution apply to us? No, it doesn't, because who follows that Constitution? But none of the lawmakers who are in power. None of the
right, and that's a problem, because we really thumbed our nose at the Constitution a long time ago, but most recently, even the right, with the cheerleaders from the conservative media, thumbed their nose at the Constitution by not vetting Obama and by not calling him on his constitutional eligibility. I know keep going back to that. But at what point do you have to stop and say, wait a minute, you're part and parcel. You facilitated. You cheered this on. You said, no, these nuts are conspiracy fringe people talking about his eligibility, which really, to me, translates into allegiance. Who are you? Where does your allegiance lie? That's really the crux of this. And we see that we've got a rogue regime in Washington doing the bidding of foreign nations, including but not limited to Saudi Arabia, including, at this point, you have to wonder, Valerie Jarrett in Iran. Because without Obama in having a foothold in the White House, Valerie Jarrett probably would not be there. But see, that just would merely slow it down, because we know that this octopus owns and controls both parties, because we heard nary a peep from the conservative right in power, if that's what you want to call it. And also, you're bringing out people are bringing out like Ted Cruz, for example, who does he qualify? Is he a legitimate, constitutionally eligible candidate for the office of the American presidency? People better be taking a look at this. The very people who are saying, "Oh, Ted Cruz is our savior," and we can't, we shouldn't, we shouldn't talk bad about him. Well, which side of your mouth are you going to be talking on tomorrow? See, this is a problem, and we are not. Excuse me, we're not following the law, and we're not following the laws, and I get that. Joe, I just saw something here. I just want to really quick give this. I know you're talking about economic news, but InfoWars ran a column. I think it was yesterday. Oh no, it was today. Victim of Castro roundups worried immensely about Jade Helm, and a guy from Cuba who witnessed Fidel Castro's mass roundups of dissidents in Cuba. He expressed alarm at the upcoming Jade Helm exercise. I agree, but what we're going to be talking about tonight, folks, is to me something. It's not what you're seeing that we need to worry about, in my view. It's what you're not seeing. It's what is it's the underlayment. It's what this exercise, the overt aspects of this exercise, is hiding. Because I personally don't think, at this point, and Joe, you feel free to jump in here, but I personally don't think that you're going to see, barring anything really drastic in terms of some sort of event or series of events, I don't think you're going to see anything really take place during this exercise, but overtly, that is. People being picked up. Now, I don't know. This is just my reasonable research, but I do think that this is providing both a psychological conditioning and cover for what we're going to be talking about tonight. And what we're going to be talking about tonight, again, human domain. Go ahead and take a look at that phrase and understand its meaning and the psychological aspects of conditioning. And this is rapid conditioning. In other words, do you ever have bad news that you're going to tell someone, and you tell them to sit down, and then you deliver the bad news?
Yeah.
Well, this is a sitting down phase, right before the bad news is delivered. Now, I'm not a date setter, I'm not a time setter, I don't know, but I'm just giving you my feeling as to the timing of this.
Yeah.
So anyway. But we do need to pay attention to what is going on here with this particular exercise, but we also need to pay attention to what this exercise is covering up.
Absolutely. In the few moments here before Nathan comes on, I want to cover this. We had guests on all week, and we haven't had time to get into too much of the Iranian-U.S. deal and what Netanyahu had said in response following the announcement of the Iran deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a very blunt message to President Barack Obama Thursday following the announcement of a tentative deal with Iran aimed at curbing the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. Netanyahu told the president that the current framework would threaten the survival of Israel, according to the Prime Minister's spokesman, Mark Regev. PM Netanyahu to President Obama. A deal based on this framework would threaten the survival of Israel. In these fateful days, Iran is accelerating the arming of its terror proxies to attack Israel. These are all tweets from Mark Regev, the spokesman for Netanyahu. President Netanyahu. This deal would legitimize Iran's nuclear program and bolster Iran's economy and increase its aggression and terror. Such a deal would not block Iran's path to the bomb, it would pave it. It would increase the risks of nuclear proliferation and the risks of a horrific war.
Yes.
It also goes on to say the alternative is standing firm and increasing the pressure on Iran until a better deal is achieved. But he went on to speak about the dangers and that this deal and Obama getting in bed with Iran.
Yep.
What phase or what time or what season that we have entered into in doing so? We have, not only Saudi Arabia as a major ally. I mean, they are against this. It's so convoluted, the situation in the Middle East, and it's meant to be that way. And will we ever get to the bottom of it? Well, when God willing, we're all in heaven. I think we will understand.
Well,
but if I can
go
finish here, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said Iran will keep its promises if the other side does, referring to the agreement yesterday. The world has acknowledged Iran in pursuing its peaceful objectives, he said during a press conference Friday. He says the nuclear enrichment issue is not a threat to any other nation. If we were given a promise, we will take action based on that promise. Of course, that depends on the other side acting on their promises too, he goes on to say.
See, there's always a condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Mm-hmm. And there's always well, we know, they can claim once the mushroom clouds are in the air and the cities are destroyed and people are dead and the buttons are pushed, it's going to be rather difficult to dissect that. I mean, this is not a simple crime scene. This is something much, much greater than that.
Yeah, Rouhani went on to say it's a breakthrough not only in the nuclear sphere but in many others. He said to look forward to positive changes in the lives of Iranians. And before June 30th, we have to make the most important step on the conclusion of the final agreement, he said.
Before when?
And before June 30th, we have to make that most important step on the conclusion of the final agreement, he said.
This is Rouhani talking now.
Yes. And the agreement would see Iran enriching uranium at 3.67%, which enables the creation of nuclear energy, but is not enough to build a nuclear weapon. This I'm reading from an RT article. Iran would be obligated to cut its centrifuges from 19,000 to 6,104, with 5,060 left for enrichment.
But see, again, we can apply the template like Jade Helm here. Look, Caroline Glick had written a great article, The Diplomatic Tract of War, CarolineGlick.com, where she just says very simply, the world powers assembled in Switzerland with representatives of the Islamic Republic. Anyway, the damage that they've already caused is irreversible. It's kind of like healthcare. It's kind of like Jade Helm exercises. It's the template by which they're going by. You could take a step back. For example, repeal healthcare, the Affordable Health Care Act, perhaps. But what damage has it already caused? And that's what this is taking place here right now. The policy of nuclear appeasement with the world's most prolific state sponsor of terrorism. Now, I understand too. You're
talking about the U.S.?
Yeah. But I understand the ludicrous nature of that statement. Okay, at its face, but there's a certain symbiotic relationship, or at least I shouldn't say that. There's at least holes being plugged in a very leaky dam wall that our policy, as convoluted as they have been, at least kept the water from rushing into the village. Now, when you take you rearrange the fingers and you take the stops out, we're going to be flooded, and the damage is going to be irreversible. They're actually starting a countdown to war, I believe, and I think we need to be paying attention, because they have really conceded every instance and position that might have placed a roadblock in the way of Iran becoming a nuclear power. That's just my view, which happens to correspond with Caroline Glick, and I don't know. It's once more, I think we have to look at the larger picture. Look at this as a chess game, not just what Washington and Iran are doing together, but what the other countries are doing. Because now you've got this is really a 10-nation confederacy that Bill Salas talked about that has developed. So, which is a result of ISIS that we created and funded. So, and we're now fighting, but we're still funding and facilitating ISIS.
I saw an article the other day that tried to differentiate between ISIS and Al Qaeda, and I don't think I still have it here. Let me see if this is it. But they, no, that's not it. They put in two different columns. They put Al Qaeda in one column and ISIS in the other column, and they said Al Qaeda and listed its affiliates and the from past to present. Then they listed ISIS and their affiliates past to present. Well, I found it interesting that they listed the Mujahideen under ISIS.
Well,
that's who was Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda was the Mujahideen, and they became Al Qaeda.
Right, the Mujahideen.
But they were listed under the ISIS column.
Al Qaeda.
It was very weird and convoluted. It was from the Daily Mail a few days ago. But I'll have to find it through looking at the history, and I'll send it to you, Dad, and you can maybe post it on the website just to show how far. I mean, this is I guess you could say, well-respected mainstream internet news site, which is posting, distorted facts or wishful thinking, at least on their part as far as history is concerned. But they're changing history to fit their narrative now. They're changing the affiliation. I mean, people are not that dumb, I hope. People are not, I mean, anybody who's paid attention to the political sphere of we'll just say current events for any length of time, especially since 79 is when we began funding the Mujahideen, and all this is verified and backed up on record from the USA government to Hillary Clinton even admitting it, and pictures of our people from the State Department and Department of Defense over there funding these people back when they were combating Russia. And now they're trying to say that the Mujahideen is turned into ISIS when trying to differentiate or show that ISIS is now fighting Al Qaeda in regions of Iraq and Syria over power.
And see, and I'm sure people, our listeners, know pretty much the basics of this. But one thing that our research has produced is, if you go back to, for example, Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley, Bill Clinton's mentor, the professor, university professor Carol Quigley, who wrote Tragedy and Hope, which is just a huge and hard read about the history, or the revised history of the world, and how he sees it to be. And you start looking back at the various intelligence programs that really, like a snake, if you will, slither between world events, and I'm talking about really from the turn of the 20th century, World War I, the snake, and World War II. It slithers through these various events and into the Marshall Plan, and FDR, the bombing of Japan, the expatriation of German scientists, and the springboard of these Nazis, the use of their intelligence and information into Vietnam, why we got into that quagmire, and what the purpose was. And again, tonight you're going to hear some very pointed information that all of this has to do with, we as Americans have used these events and have sharpened the playbook. When I say we as Americans, I'm talking about the American military, the military-industrial complex. There is a reason that the reason that we're at today where we're at is because of all of the exercises, all of the operations, all of the infiltration and the changes, the ever so subtle changes that were implemented over the years. You notice that they didn't take America as a nation if it were a train and slam it at 100 miles an hour into the tunnel wall. No, they're slowing it down and changing direction, and this is what it's all about. And people have to start understanding. We have to look deeper into into the other dimensions. We have to look at the dimensionality of this. We have to look at what's going on as the Matrix on steroids, perhaps. See, we just can't look at a military operation or 2 or 3 or 10 or 20 at this point and say, well, it's over. They're coming to get us. No. No, there's more to it than that. It's more insidious than that. And I think that's the real thing, because when they do come for us, the majority of people are never going to see it coming. I believe it. They're never going to see it coming. Right now, they could see it coming a mile away, or in this case, 3 months away. Anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Joe, I want to say this. Christians need to be very afraid. If you look at the population growth projections,
afraid?
Well, they're concerned, I should say. The religious profile of the world is rapidly changing. That is, and if you look at the number of Muslims, they're going to nearly equal the number of Christians around the world by 2050. Think about that for a second. Through the procreation. And the numbers are incredible. So think of the number of Muslims. It's going to be nearly equal to the number of Christians by 2050. The atheists, agnostics, and other people who don't have a religion, so to speak, although they're increasing in numbers in countries such as the United States and France, they're making up a very big declining share of the world's total population. In Europe, I should say, Muslims are going to make up 10% of the overall population. Again, this is by 2050. In the United States, Christians are going to decline, or are projected to decline, from more than 3/4 of the population in 2010 to 2/3 in 2050. Judaism will no longer be the largest non-Christian religion. Muslims will be more numerous in the U.S. than people who identify as Jewish on the basis of religion. 4 out of every 10 Christians in the world will be living by 2015 in sub-Saharan Africa. That's 25%. Folks, as of 2010, Christianity was the world's largest religion, 2.2 billion estimated adherents, nearly a third of all, almost 7 billion people on Earth. Islam was second, 1.6 billion adherents, or 23% of the global population. That's going to radically change, and that's by procreation. I just wanted to throw that out there before we get any further. I know it's kind of a side turn, but just if we did nothing, and so far out of the conspiracy realm, just demographics, just numbers, just think about that for a moment, and think about the cause and effect. Think about what'll, the changes that'll make. So this is why we have to go out and we have to convert religion. I mean, we have to really act as Christians. So anyway, but I got to tell you, folks, you're in for a real. But just buckle up and be ready, because Nathan Leal, Watchman'sCry.com. If you go to the right hand side of our website, HagmannHagmann.com, you can click on his name; it'll take you directly to his website. And I'll just say this: he has been researching the more sinister aspects of Jade Helm and other military operations. If you go to his website, Operation Jade Helm, The Real Truth, look on the right-hand side, the top right-hand side of his website. That's Watchman'sCry.com, or go to HagmannHagmann.com, click on his name. And he writes, Jade Helm, what is it? The operation is littered with speculation, rumor, and genuine concern, but what is it? Nathan writes, I have uncovered information that examines and exposes it to its very core. And folks, I can assure you he has. This is his investigative work product, research product. He has been working night and day since I last spoke with him last week. And bottom line here, what you're about to hear is you're not going to hear anywhere else by anyone else. And he's got the notes, show notes up to prove it. With that, Nathan Leal, welcome to the program tonight, sir.
Thanks for having me on, gentlemen. Once again, it's always a great blessing to come on and share the things that God has helped me to uncover and to see. And, Doug and Joe, in these unsettled times, in these dark days, things have become so bizarre, so weird, but they are actually what we have been expecting to happen, but it's just so weird to watch it happen. it's like you're watching a movie. It's like we're in the Twilight Zone, and we've talked off the air, Doug and Joe, and about this very thing of how in the midst of the change that America is going through, most people don't see it, and they have no clue that it's happening. And Jade Helm is one of them, and I don't mean to say that in a manner that isn't insulting. What I mean to say is, in these last days, just like you say in the beginning of your programs very often, Doug, you say that we have to look through a different lens, through more than three dimensions, and it's exactly true. If we do not include the spiritual perspective, we're not going to see the things that are happening for their very to the core of their truth. So Jade Helm is one example of the deception that is taking place right now. The Bible tells us there's going to be a great deception in the end times, and I want to just challenge everyone that is listening, no matter where they are spiritually, this is the thing that we need to get a hold of. We are in the last days. The Bible prophesied it. Whether you want to believe it or not, it's all coming true. We see these things happening before our eyes, and one of the big variables, the major variables that's going to make it possible for end-time prophecy to happen and take place is that a deception will be required and needed to pull the wool over everyone's eyes, to have things hidden in plain sight. And for some reason, Doug, I'm noticing many individuals are looking at end-time events, but they're not seeing it past the surface level. And I read, and it saddens me. It saddens me that when I go and read the reports from my colleagues, well-meaning alternative media colleagues, the majority, Doug, over 90%, and Joe, you can attest to this too. We've talked about it off the air. Probably more than 90% only look at it through the eyes of the physical. And they only look at it through the eyes of who they can blame and who they can point fingers to. And if people limit themselves to that viewpoint and that perspective, they're going to be caught off guard and be part of the fodder. Because the Bible tells us that many will be deceived. And it also says that many will be deceived because they have no love for the truth. So in order to understand what is happening, we have to include the variable of God, of the spiritual, of the spirit realm, of Jesus. And if people don't want to do that, if they're just paying lip service when they show up with their buddies, the patriot gatherings and the militia gatherings, and they sit around and drink coffee and, yeah, rah, rah, we're Americans and Christians, etc., but that's as far as it goes. If they are going to react or deal, or if they plan to deal with the things that are coming only from the physical realm of bronze, and if they do not include the spirit realm and their relationship with God, listeners, please hear me. The Bible is very clear. Those who do not include God in their plans are going to be the fodder. They will be a part of the count, the statistics, the body count, the carcasses. There are going to be a lot of carcasses, Doug. So when we're watching these things take place, those of you that are listening, if you have a blog or you make YouTube videos and you do not try to see these things beyond the physical realm, all you are doing is relaying and echoing empty words or surface words that will play a role in not letting people be entirely prepared and ready. And, Doug, that is the thing that is the most that's disappointing, I guess. A lot of people are not going to be ready because they are not including the entire formula. Jade Helm is occurring right before our eyes, and it is amazing that their logo, I've seen the logo on videos and on blog posts, people talk about it, and the truth of Jade Helm is in their logo. It's right there. And I have not read one report that talks about it. Not one, Doug. And I said this with you off the air, and it's grievous. How could it be that so many hundreds of people are reacting to what's going on in Jade Helm and they don't even know what it is? So, ladies and gentlemen, this program is very important. I was talking to Doug off the air, and I said, Doug, how do we warn the people and educate them that there is way more than meets the eye? This exercise has many layers, and part of the layers have to do with psychological warfare, psychological operations. They have to do with data mining, data gathering. Part of the purpose of this program is to see how people are going to react. That's part of it. The computers are in full motion 24/7 right now. They are compiling all the information. The computers in the NSA and in Rand Corporation, Tavistock, they are going over and calculating the responses that people are doing with Jade Helm. And so far, Doug, what I am seeing is that they're being successful in this operation, because what they wanted to happen out of this operation is exactly what I am reading about. I am reading about people just responding without knowing what's going on. And if people just respond without knowing what's going on, it's like when we saw the tsunami hit Japan, the water went out. Hey, wow, let's go pick up seashells and look at the fish flopping around. I'm going to check it out. So when people respond without seeing the big picture, they go out into the beyond the surf and walk along the soggy sand. And then the tidal wave came in, and it killed how many? Tens of thousands of people, because they didn't see the big picture. So what we have going on in Jade Helm right now is a huge, huge operation, but most of it is psychological, and it's data gathering, it's data mining, and we're going to talk about all of that. Now, Doug, I want to encourage every listeners far and wide, wherever you are, whether you're here stateside or in the other parts of the world, please listen to this program enough times to understand what we're going to share. I have included a page of links, and I'm not finished creating that page, but so far I have a lot of stuff. Doug, do you have it there in front of you? If you go to my website, watchmanscry.com, at the very top, just like how, as Doug mentioned, Operation Jade Helm, if you have the ability, go to my website. It says show notes, links, and images. There's a lot of information there, and I'm just getting started. But the information that is there, I want to challenge every person that's listening to this program. And, Doug, if the people listening are part of patriot groups or Tea Party groups or constitutionalists, the Oath Keepers, Christians, people wanting to know what's going on in the end times, whatever group you may be a part of, you need to know this information, and you need to share this information. Every group needs to be well acquainted with the terms that we're going to talk about tonight, Doug, because it's a matter, I fully believe that it is a matter of life and death, and it is a matter of whether people are able to stay one step ahead and not be delivered up. Because the Bible tells us that people are going to be delivered up. They're going to be rounded up. That's what tyrants do. So if you don't want to be a part of that, if you want to stay one step ahead, if you want your eyes to be discerning, then it takes education. Now, Doug, there's a lot of articles and PDFs and white papers that are a part of this study, but I want to challenge people. Folks, apply some effort. Doug, it's amazing that a lot of people want to be spoon-fed. They want to just hear, but they don't want to read. They don't want to research. And let me say this, Doug, the people that don't want to research and learn this stuff are going to be the fodder. You, in order to survive, you need to get off the chair, and you need to print out some things, and you need to go over them and get your highlighter out and study this information. Because, Doug, again, if the people don't do it, and we were talking about it off the air with frustration. Doug, you remember that?
Oh, very well. Yeah. This thing is so huge. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would consider this program the most important I have done on Hagmann. And Doug, I don't want to toot my own horn, but this information is important. So I want to challenge all the listeners with this. Get acquainted with this information and make YouTubes about it. Take this information and run with it. Write books, write PDFs, print them out. When you have meetings with your friends, your families, your co-patriots, so to speak, talk about this and devise countermeasures against this, because the only way that anyone's going to survive is to devise countermeasures, and the countermeasures are going to require some heavy-duty brainstorming, because just on the surface, I was talking to you, Doug, off the air, and I brought up that scenario, that very thing, that requirement. Doug, how do we counter this? And thus far, I'm limited in the answers. The only thing I have at this point is it's going to take the discernment that comes from God. That's it. Boy, so, I couldn't say. That's correct. We had a discussion about discernment during the last night's show, and Nathan, I got to say, discernment is about the only thing that we can use, or the only tool that we've got spiritual discernment, to understand what's real, what's not, where to be fixing our gaze, and what is just eye candy in the flashbang of the flashbang as opposed to the real meat of what's really going on. But man, let me just say this, folks. When Nathan says this is perhaps one of the most important programs, if not the most important program, pay attention. Pay attention.
All right. Now, depending on how much time we have, I'm going to touch several categorical points. If I have enough time at the end of the show, I'm going to share a new prophetic warning that I'm still wrestling with. And, Doug, you know what it is.
I do. But
I'm going to share it if possible, if I have enough time. If I don't have enough time, I'll share it in the future. But it has to do with another false flag / possible attack in America. I'm still not sure how it's going to take place, but I know where it's going to take place. And, Doug, I've shared that with you. So if we have enough time, we'll talk about it. Now, I also want to qualify what I'm going to say in this warning is, folks, please, again, get familiar with everything, these terms. And for those of you that may find yourself frustrated or influenced by things you read on the Internet that say the Watchmen are a bunch of fear-mongering people who just enjoy scaring others, I want to say that up front too, Doug. If that's what you're struggling with, then that means that you're not where you need to be with God. If fear overwhelms you when we talk about these things, then I want to challenge you to get right with God, or to apply the measures of faith that we find in Scripture, so that you will have more boldness and courage to endure the things that are coming. Now, Doug, even though some people may think that it's too scary and it's too overwhelming, if they're a Christian, they have not tapped into the power that's available for them. So, my friend, if you may be struggling with fear or frustration, or you're not sure if you can do this, because I know that the things we talk about at times are very scary, but you can make it if Jesus lives inside you. And the only difference between where you are now and where God wants you to be is to acknowledge that and to ask God to help you with the courage that is available. You can be a major part, listener, of the kingdom of God and the end-time narrative. And God did not let you be born in the year that you were born in these end times so that you can just be afraid and overwhelmed. God allowed you to be born for such a time as this so that you can make a difference and have an effect on people in a positive manner. So if you are not that person yet, I want to encourage you that you can get there. Now, one of the things that stops people from getting there is failure and spiritual sluggishness. And I want to say this real quick also, Doug, I just put out a new sermon. It's on my website. In fact, it's right under the link of this one, and it's called Defeating Spiritual Sluggishness. Ladies and gentlemen, if you need a word from the Lord and you want to be encouraged and strengthened and you feel defeated, you're not where you want to be, if you're hungry, I have a challenge that's going to bless you and encourage you and get you back to where you need to be. So, Doug, that's a side note. I share the fear message, the warning message, but I also include spiritual food and nourishment. So that's there. I just want people to know that. So if anyone...
Very timely, and very good, Nathan. I grabbed that before the show, and very timely, very good, and necessary. Thank you.
Right. So, listeners, if you hear the lies and the slander that the government shills and the government trolls who are in some boiler room and their job is to slander Doug, slander me, slander Steve, slander all the watchmen, you're going to read negative things. You're going to read things that will create doubt in your mind. But from me, just know this. I do share the warning message of challenge and of the things that are coming, but at the same time, I'm also sharing the message of hope and remedy of Jesus. So they're there. So if anyone says Nathan's just a fearmonger, well, if you go to my website and you see a sermon that says you need to repent, get saved, get strengthened, then that statement's not true, is it, Doug? So
not at all.
I'm including that in my beginning right now. So let's move on. Now, there's a lot of things that we can talk about today. Let me just recite a bullet point list of several of them. And, Doug, these things are going to be a part of shows in the future. These things may cause you to interrupt your regular schedule because you need to talk about it or have a show over the weekend, like you said, because these things are all in development right now. War is in development in so many parts of the world right now. Isn't it amazing? All over the world. War is coming, ladies and gentlemen. North Africa, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Israel, Ukraine. Doug, have you ever in your
young
calling
life
as a watchman seen this much development all at once?
No. And this, you know what, Nathan, this even exceeds what Steve and I were talking about back in 2003 and 2004. The totality of activity worldwide exceeds the scope of what we thought would happen by this time, or if we made it to this time. We didn't think that all the pots would be boiling at once. We thought one pot or two boil, bang, and then something happened. Not this at this level.
So things are very unsure, and in essence, we are watching the fulfillment of Matthew 24. There will be wars and rumors of wars. We're there, folks. We're there. So war is coming. Now, I don't have an exact date for all the wars, but there's different wars that are going to arrive and come. But I don't have a date. I'm just warning that they're coming. Also, martial law is coming. We're going to talk about that. An economic crisis is coming, a failure of the dollar, and also one of the very necessary elements to get this thing going, especially in America, is a pivotal event. That's needed. So a pivotal event is coming. And when it happens, its purpose will be to galvanize public opinion to accept war or to accept new security measures by Homeland Security or military or martial law. And it will also be necessary and used to develop new policies that in the past sounded extreme and that in the past most people would not accept and that in the past most people would resist. But in the future, in tomorrow's new world, they're going to sound like the proper remedy. Now, I'm qualifying the warning that I'm sharing right now to include that I don't have an exact date yet, but the events are coming. So for those people who are frustrated or anger at doom's failure to arrive thus far and saying, Nathan, where is it? Come on, you keep saying it. Well, Doug, that's what they said to the messengers in the Old Testament also. Where is it, Jeremiah? Well, Jeremiah warned for 40 years. He went through 5 different administrations, 5 different kings, and he kept warning, but finally it happened, 40 years. So instead of, if people might be thinking this, instead of complaining and saying that you're just making it up or where is it, you should instead be thanking God. We should be thanking God, Doug and Joe, for the added time to prepare, for the added time to prepare ourselves and our families.
Nathan, I bet you that people were really taking them to task on message boards and forums back then, don't you think? Never mind. That joke didn't land. Okay. So
no, it's true, and we read the words of the frustration from Jeremiah because he at times doubted himself, and there was even one part of his ministry where he said, God, have you deceived me? Have you just used me to say these things and it's not true? He even thought of folding up his tent and quitting. But then, here's what happened, Doug. When you are called to be a watchman of God or a messenger of God or a servant of God or a scribe of God to deliver a message from the throne room of God, as Jeremiah, folks, some of you wonder what makes us tick and how we're wired. Jeremiah said, God, when I thought about stopping, my bones burned within me. My spirit burned within me because the word was inside me like a fire, and I had to share it with the people. I had to let the people know that your word is true, and your word is like a hammer that crushes the rock down to powder. So, God, I'm sorry for doubting, but here I am. And, Doug, that's what God does even in these last days. He has raised up watchmen and messengers and many people to deliver the warning message, and that word burns like a fire inside, doesn't it? If we don't say it, we'll explode. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a glimpse of what's inside, under the hood. But let's move on. In the remaining time that we have a lot of work to do. And, Doug, I want to challenge the folks out there who know they're not ready because they know it and God knows it. So we need, in the remaining time, to continue to get ready. I see what the clock at 6 o'clock. Do you want me to keep going or do you want me to pause?
We'll take a quick break here.
Edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Nathan Leal is our guest. His website is watchmanscry.com. Go there. On the right-hand side at the top is show notes for today. Watchman's Cry, Operation Jade Helm, The Real Truth. Once again, Nathan Leal.
And Nathan, okay, here on your show page, Operation Jade Helm, The Real Truth, we've got Blackhawks practicing in the middle of urban U.S. cities. You ask the question, why? You got soldiers practicing, arresting U.S. citizens. Again, you ask why. And we're seeing the notorious white van of clandestine folklore. This is not fiction. It's really happening on U.S. soil. Now, we need to know, we have to get into this deep and quick and deep. What's going on here? What in the world did you find out? And I know what it is, but man, people are going to be surprised.
All right, Doug. Now, if people can speed read, they'll see a lot of the notes that I have right here. But let's just go through it. For many people who are trying to understand Jade Helms, so far, they're in the dark. We're in the dark. It was announced. I believe Alex Jones broke the story, and then people took it and ran with it. And then the minute they saw the Blackhawks and the practice of picking people up and arresting them, that was enough for people to get real upset and make videos and start talking about it and reporting that this is it. But let me place two scenarios on the table for the sake of scholarship and integrity. While I'm not a mind reader and I don't have a crystal ball, I cannot say that this is not practice for martial law as some of the videos are stating and as some of the concerns are being verbalized right now. I cannot say that it is not. I cannot say that with the exercises that are going to be happening, there's not going to be an event that will be very convenient in the timing, and then they're just going to go right into it. I won't say that, Doug, because I don't know. However, I want to also include another deeper ingredient, and that's what this study is about. Now, their report has stated, and for those that have been able to download their PDF, in fact, I believe I have a link where if you go down on my page, the Jade Helm logo, it says Jade Helm, Master of the Human Domain. The nuts and bolts of Jade Helm is in their logo. If you click that link, it'll open up the PDF of their request to conduct the exercise. And it's a few pages long. Most of you have seen it on YouTube. It says what the purpose is, what it's for, what they plan to get out of it, and for the most part, it's a sanitized, generic announcement that, hey, this is just for the good of our soldiers. They need to always be equipped, which is true. Our boys need to be trained. Our girls need to be trained. But is that all it is? And because of what the logo said, Doug, I have to go beyond just accepting their statement of it's just an exercise. It's a benign exercise that's necessary. Because the logo tells us what it means. Now, before I go into that, I want to mention this. Folks, if you're a Christian, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a saint of God, if you're a brethren of the faith, there's a good chance you're awake, and there's a good chance that you want to know what's going on. You don't want to be blind. You want to warn your family, and some of you understand the scrimmage process and the pain that is involved in trying to warn friends and family because it's painful. You get tackled. You get knocked down. You get hurt. It's not easy. So you understand that, but still God has placed something inside you, an awareness and a discernment, because you know that this thing's true. And if you are a Christian and a child of God, you want to know all the particulars and the variables of how this thing is going to go down. And I want to just share one right here, Doug. I know that one of the biggest opposition to warning people that this could possibly be Bible prophecy that will take us into the tribulation period. Now, I want to qualify this. I don't know when the tribulation is going to start. It could be next year. It could be in 6 months. It could be in 5 years or 10 years. I don't know. I do suspect that it's very soon, though. But you're not going to get me to say it's next week because I don't know.
Right.
And I think that's the safest place to be, because if we don't know, then it keeps us vigilant. Now, if perchance the tribulation is very soon, then that would mean that the prophecies that Jesus shared with us in the book of Matthew, chapter 24, are going to take place. And if we look at Matthew 24, we can read
some of the things that are going to happen. And in Matthew 24, Jesus said in verse 9, then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted and shall kill you. Now that's in verse 9 of Matthew 24. The next verse says, in the last days many will be offended and betray one another. So those two things are going to be going on in the time of the end. Now, depending on where people are, and I don't want to turn this into a debate on the rapture, because that's not what this is about, but if perchance some of you that are listening have been struggling with preparing over these things because you've been told that, hey, Pastor said we're going to be out of here, and before these things really go down, God's going to rapture us, so I don't have to worry. If that's your strategy, if that's your plan, here's a question. What if it's wrong? What if the timing's wrong? And I want to present something real quick regarding that. There's a verse that many people use who believe in the rapture, and some of the satellite TV channels use this verse to challenge people to send money to them because they say, folks, the Great Commission is part of our strategy, and we need to do it. The Great Commission leaves us responsible, and the Great Commission holds us responsible to accomplish something that Jesus said needs to be done before he comes back. And that's found in Matthew 24, verse 14. Let me read it. It says, and the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness, and then the end shall come. All right. If that's a part of the Great Commission for the entire church, that means that it applies to anyone, no matter what they believe, as far as the timing of the rapture. Do we agree on that, Doug? Whether you're pre-trib, mid, post, pre-rap, doesn't matter. That's part of the Great Commission. That's our assignment. Now, folks, if you're struggling with wanting to prepare because you figure you're going to escape, make note of where that verse is found in Matthew 24. It's found in verse 14. The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached. Doug, who's going to accomplish that? The church. So in order for this to be done, that means the church is on earth still. So if the rapture is in Matthew 24, eventually at some point it's going to happen, but we can tell by verse 14 that it hasn't happened yet. Do we agree on that? Is that fairly simple?
Yeah.
Process of reasoning and intellect? Okay. If the Great Commission is occurring in verse 14 and the church is doing that, if we go backwards and read verse 9, that happens before or during the Great Commission to preach the gospel to the whole world. Verse 9 says, they will deliver you up and shall kill you.
Right.
Which means that the church is going to be around while they are entrusted with the Great Commission to spread the gospel, and while they're still around, at some point in the end, we're going to see a new policy throughout the world of kidnapping people, kidnapping Christians, rounding up, extracting, sending them to concentration, internment, FEMA camps, Camp FEMA, Hotel FEMA, etc. Verse 9 tells us, they shall deliver you up. And when that happens, you're going to be afflicted. Some of you will be killed. Okay, Doug, that's very important for us to get a hold of. This is Bible prophecy. So when we look at Jade Helm, we're watching them practice delivering people up. So is it possible that this Jade Helm exercise could be a part of the bigger picture of Bible prophecy? Maybe, maybe not. But we need to look at it if we are using proper biblical scholarship. Also, in verse 10, the following verse, it says, then shall many be offended and betray one another. Now, Doug, this is the part that's very, very important, and this is the core of Jade Helm.
Right.
Many will betray one another. When we go back and look at history, and when we look at communism, Soviet Russia, communist China, or the dictatorships that have come and gone, Pol Pot, Baby Doc in Haiti, they all had their secret police squads that busted in a door at 3 a.m. and kidnapped someone.
And Nathan, this is why it's so important for everyone to understand and know and be familiar with history, military history, and political history all across the world. You've got to understand what has transpired. Go ahead.
This is already a part of history. It's happened already, and when it has happened, we know by looking at history that the results were horrible. Torture, maiming, rape, assassination, murder. It was humans can be the worst, barbaric, demonic, devilish, demonic-filled, satanic-filled creatures in God's creation, because we have seen humans do horrible things already in history.
Sure.
Atrocious things, unspeakable things. And during the tribulation period, we're going to watch these things take place times 10. It's going to happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not trying to scare you, but one of the strategies that needs to be laid on the table is, in addition to knowing this is going to happen, we have to also tell ourselves and get a hold of the strategy that it's going to be very important to have discernment, to have a Holy Ghost radar, to have an intuition that knows if someone's going to betray us, if that things are not right. So we're going to talk more about betrayal, but the reason I'm sharing this, Doug, is so that if some people who may be pre-tribbers are listening to this, and part of you is struggling with this because you've been told rapture is going to rescue you, according to Matthew 24, the timing still shows that Christians are going to go through this mess. That's why I'm sharing it.
I gotta say this: the 147 Christians that were massacred here in the country escapes me. It was a tribulation for them. At least they thought it was. I'm sure they thought it was. So whether it's tribulation with a capital T or a small t, there will be tribulation coming to the Christians here in this country, the believers in this country. It doesn't matter. In fact, we don't even have to discuss the rapture because tribulation, big T, capital T, or small t, it don't matter. It's coming. And we're going to endure some level of tribulation. And that does include not only persecution, but identification and betrayal. And betrayal is perhaps the most key component here, Nathan. And I'm just going to shut up and let you continue.
Exactly, Doug. Big amen to that. That's true. Tribulation is already taking place in the Middle East, and our brethren are getting slaughtered already. And the news is mum about it. Because who cares about Christians? Here in America now, who cares? Obama sure doesn't. So, anyway, moving on. The roundups are not only going to include Christians. They're going to include a lot of different people, a lot of different categories of people. And let's talk about America. In America, we have a lot of people who are waking up, and they have different levels of spiritual strength. They're at different levels of spiritual faith or religion. But nevertheless, there are brothers and sisters as countrymen. There are our fellow patriots. So they matter. And the problem with them mattering is that the people in these categories care about the Constitution because they remember how it used to be. And, Doug, it's amazing that when you look at a pie chart of the ages that are alive right now in America, do you notice that the millennials right now, the young people, the teens, the college kids have been now brainwashed, and we have several ongoing sessions of freshman class and then senior graduates that have gone through the turnstile of the new education and Common Core and Hillary news and Hillary education and Clinton education. We can go back to where the United States, with the cultural changes, started brainwashing and taking it out of the history books and out of the teachings of our students, our young people, the Constitution and how horrible communism is and the truth about it. So we have a new generation of young people today that do not understand the importance of the knowledge of the Constitution. They don't understand what American patriotism really is. They don't understand what the values of our forefathers are. They don't get it. So when you look at the age structure of America and you look at 20-somethings, many of them have no clue. 30-somethings, it starts becoming a few of them might know it, but when you start getting to 40 and above, it's like there's a change because the majority of my listeners are 40 and above. Do you notice that, Doug?
Yeah, and the demographics are like that. Just think of it this way, folks. The millennials that are alive today, they grew up basically with the precepts of Common Core in their educational system. They don't remember a time in their adult life that DHS did not exist, TSA didn't exist. They feel it's normal, at least normal for them, to be groped and have their rights stripped at airports and stadiums and other locations. So pay attention to the demographics is what you're saying, I think, Nathan.
Exactly, and that demographic is going to be used against the older ones that do not like what's happening. That's what I was trying to get at, and it's going to play a huge role. The older generations of America are going to be a problem for the New World Order, but they already have a remedy, and the remedy has been discussed in a closed room. They've gone over all the contingencies. They have this thing mapped out and planned out to the point of evil genius, Doug, and I don't mean to give them credit, but, Satan has been at this for thousands of years, and he has kind of figured out how to run a dictatorship. He knows deception. He knows how to sway people. He knows what buttons to push. He knows how people are wired. He knows what people are afraid of, and the story is the same for all of humanity. People are afraid of pain, torture, and death. They're afraid to be separated from their families. They're afraid of big changes. So they have this thing figured out, and they're going to use it in the future of Obama's coming plantation. It's not just Obama, it's the world elite, but that thing's coming. Nightmare America is arriving. Now, let's talk about Jade Helm. There's a lot of videos about it. A lot of people are talking about it, but what is it? The logo, if you're at that part of my notes, you see the logo, Doug?
Yeah, I do.
It says, Jade Helm, master the human domain. Now, I've heard a few people try to decode the top part. Jade Helm, jade is green. China, it's from China. The rock, the stone from China. So Is it China in control at the helm? Is that what it means? Well, I have been trying to – this thing has several layers, Doug. It's not just exactly what it is because they love to place it in plain sight. And up to this point, how many weeks have gone by where I haven't heard one video question the bottom phrase? Have you, Doug?
No, they've all been attempting gematria of the Jade Helm and references to the phrase or the name Jade Helm. But you know what? You hit the key point here, folks. It's not what's on the top; it's what's on the bottom. Master the human domain. You talk about many layers. There you go.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, here we go. If you're taking notes, follow along, listen to this program several times if you have to, look at the notes, and I want to challenge everyone to do searches on this. If you don't want to use Google, use Bing or Start Pages or some other if you're concerned about that, or go to the library. But the term human domain must be educated to all of the freedom-appreciating Americans that are out there. Ladies and gentlemen, this means you. Don't just listen to this show and say, that term, Nathan talked about it, and then forget. This has to become a strategy and a knowledge because we just read in the Bible, they're going to deliver us up. The method that they're going to use to deliver us up is included in this program, the human domain. So let's talk about it. Now, the human domain is a new strategy that the U.S. military is now incorporating in their theaters of war, in their operations. Those of you that are in the military, you know this, if you've studied it or if you've been exposed to it. The concept of human domain is part of, here's another word, folks, write down human domain and then write down phase zero shaping. Another key point, very important. Phase zero shaping, what is that? Well, when we look at regular traditional military missions of the past, for the most part, when the military shows up, they're ready to fire their guns, to fire their bullets, to use the toys and blow things up, and the boys are charged, they're full of adrenaline, they're ready to go for it, right, Doug? We've talked to military people, they cannot wait to get into the phase of boots on the ground and activating their weapons, taking it off safety and lighting it up. All right, those missions or war theaters can be divided into 5 phases, and I have them listed right here. The first one is the run-up to hostilities.
Yep.
It's getting ugly. The people are waving their swords, and finally the boots are showing up on the ground, and we have our guns pointed at you. Are you going to flinch, or are you going to respond? Are you going to play chicken with us? What is it? Just give us a reason. That's phase 1. Phase 2, they're lighting up the targets, right, Doug?
Yep.
Seize the initiative.
That's right. Yep.
Phase 3, major combat, and our military doesn't just go up to fire bullets. Our military goes up to win, to dominate, to scare, shock and awe. All that stuff in video games, that's the purpose. So the domination phase then occurs to, by the way, look how it's worded. I got this from a military document, and I have the link, by the way, where it says 5 phases on the top. Above phase 1, that's the document. You can go there and read it. It's very long. It explains all of this. But then we have phase 3, to dominate and break the enemy's will. Now, Doug, when the military shows up, they're not just showing up to for a draw, or maybe to cause some pain and maybe not, or to run or to retreat. When the U.S. military shows up, they're going to break the enemy's will. That's the purpose. They're going to scare them. They want to see white flags of surrender or charred bodies on the ground. We know this.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please think of this. Those exercises that we are watching, they're not doing it, and they don't have holes in their plan, with holes in their strategy. They're not doing it with contingencies that maybe they didn't think of. They have supercomputers in the military that can go over millions of different scenarios, and they're ready for every one of them. So for the people that want to think that, I can devise a scheme over dinner with my buddy and they didn't even think of it, no. Our military has been practicing and gathering data over the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, and all the other theaters over the past several years, the past decades. Doug, they know what they're doing. This is all they think about. So phase 3 is to dominate the enemy's will and to break it. Phase 4, post-conflict. What is that? Well, we already dominated their will, and now it's to stabilize everybody and mop up the mess and rebuild the bridges and rebuild the grid and the water treatment plants and put out the oil wells, oil fires, and then control the people and occupy them and drive up and down the streets and have them become obedient to us and not fight what we want to do. And then phase 5, they set up the vassal puppets and then leave. And that's what we see occurring in Iraq. Of course, it's a failure now, but those are the 5 phases of war, traditionally.
Traditional, that's right.
Traditionally.
And please emphasize that. That's right. And notice there's no phase 0 there. Okay, go ahead.
Not yet. Okay, but now with military budget changes and the reduction of military forces, they're laying off the brass, they're getting rid of some of the soldiers, and they want to do more with less people. That's the new strategy of the military. So there's been a change in the strategy. Part of the change includes, and I've gone over several documents, Doug, you have too, because of the post-9/11 world and the new millennium, we no longer have regular state enemies. We no longer show up with our flag and then across the field they have their flag and we march and fight and whoever has the flag standing wins because we're fighting another country. We now have theaters that involve non-state actors, that's what they call them, which are insurgents and terrorists who cross borders, like ISIS is across borders or Al-Shabaab is across borders. Terrorists do that. So as a result of the non-state actor of terrorism that the U.S. has developed, by the way, and funded, the U.S. military has had to adapt and change the strategies to now address these smaller groups and deal with them. So how do you do that? How do you conquer, how do you go into a region or a state or a nation and conquer the nation if you know you're going to have insurgents hiding in the sewers and behind trees and behind rocks and behind people? How do you deal with that? Well, they came up with new terminology, and instead of looking at the terrain as a map, because in the past, Doug, for the student of war, the generals have their map, they unroll them and put pins in them and the flags, and it's the game of risk, right? Okay, we're going to move our forces here and take this hill, and it's about gaining terrain, real estate. And as you move across the terrain, you don't have to worry about what's behind it because eventually the goal is to have all of the terrain. Well, in the war of the future, it's not about just having terrain because it's easy to land a helicopter in a lot of countries, but just because you land in a country and you're in the terrain does not mean that you're not going to have enemies because now the terrain consists of humans, people who are not happy with you showing up and taking over their country. So in order to counter this, the new strategy is to acknowledge and realize that the future wars are going to involve dealing with people.
Now,
human terrain.
Right, Nathan. Let me just say this: in my research, the military is presenting this as the kind of the squishy, holding hands kind of thing. That's a good thing. In other words, human domain. This operationally is a good thing because we're going to go in there and win the hearts and minds of the people, but you cannot, and folks, this is where Nathan is right on the money here. Well, he's right on the money of the whole thing, but importantly, most importantly, or very importantly, is what the military is doing with incorporating the traditional strategy with a new strategy, and that's the human domain mapping, phase 0 mapping, and also what that'll do is just in kind of a brief summary here is basically programming or insertion of assets into a group of people or groups of people during an exercise or exercises before, either long before or during that exercise, for the purpose of already conquering and already taking over or identifying those troublemakers or those people within that group or those groups. In addition to that, think of this, and I'm going to shut up, but think of this. We are told that this is in preparation for fighting, for example, in foreign countries. They're practicing here in the United States for urban warfare in other countries. Well, if that was the case, that's a bald-faced lie, because you fight how you train, and you train how you fight, and you cannot perform human domain or human. You can't perform this with our population. I mean, in theory, it sounds like you could, but in all reality, it will not work. But go ahead, sir.
Exactly, Doug. The terrain that they want to conquer consists of human beings. And this is the part that's very important to get a hold of. Humans are the ones, when you break down war and you really think about it, it's about people involved with other people and controlling people and conquering areas where those people live. So if humans are the ones you're fighting against or conquering or trying to pacify or command or control, in the mix of those humans, you're going to have humans and others who don't like that plan. They don't want to be commanded or controlled. They don't want to be pacified, so they're going to resist. They're going to make IEDs. They're going to make roadside bombs, and they're going to try to stop your plan. So in order to deal with these humans that do not like the plan, the Army decided that it's better to try to know who the enemy human terrain is before they show up and go in with boots on the ground. This is the part that's real important, Doug. They have to know beforehand who the opposition in the human terrain is. They saw it as it's better to know who's going to object to the MRAPs driving up and down the streets, and they want to know who's going to object to the Bradley vehicles. So in the past, they have been able to make statistics that when you conquer a nation, and they have this down to a science, Doug. When you conquer a nation, the American military has figured, and other militaries have also figured this out. You can look at a pie chart and you can look at stats, and usually there's a certain percentage of people that want to comply, and they will comply. They don't want to fight. They're just going to, because out of fear or because of their age or because they're feeble, they have weaknesses. Maybe they have a certain ideology or a religion, or they want to trust you, or they believe what you tell them. They're not going to fight you. We saw this when Hitler went into France and Czechoslovakia and Poland and all these other countries. A portion of the population sat down their arms and said, okay, you can have it. They laid down their arms and said, just leave me alone, let me live my life. We see that from history. We also see the same thing in Iraq. When we went in, a certain percentage of the population did not want to be troublemakers. So the military knows this. Okay, in the human terrain pie chart, a certain amount, a certain percentage is going to comply, but a certain percentage of the pie chart is going to not comply. They're going to revolt. So those that are going to revolt are going to require certain variables and certain measures and certain certain elements that we have already learned about in other past theaters or in past military history. The people that revolt and resist fall into a certain profile. They have it down, Doug. They can see the profile. They know what the profile is. And in order to have people revolt, it requires that there are gatherings of people. Now, folks, please think about this. It requires that there are people that assemble together and talk about it. It requires that there are people that prompt it and promote it. In other words, leadership of the revolts. It requires that there is organization, that they are organized, that there are planners, that there are trainers, educators, people who have the ideology that want to support this and are able to communicate that same ideology to others. So they're very, very well at salesmanship and convincing others of things. They have charisma.
Right. And I didn't mean. Sorry for interrupting, but this answers the question as to why. For example, we saw the change from Islamic terrorists, the real terrorists, at least in the eyes of the general population, to the so-called terrorists now, the patriot groups, the conservative Christians, the constitutionalists, and so on. We saw this change take place over the last decade, and that is the sum and substance of this reevaluation of the enemy in terms of human domain mapping.
The strongest force that a human being could have driving his will, driving his determination, his or her determination. What is the strongest force on the planet, Doug? Religion. Right. And religious ideology. Whether it's mild or radical, religion is powerful. So the pie chart includes, and thanks for bringing that up, these ISIS people are radical in their religious beliefs. If you can assemble a group and train a group of people to be radical, there's no stopping them. They'll die trying to display their beliefs. They'll die, and they'll kill to display their beliefs, and the profile shows this. So part of the human mapping has to include this profile. So when our U.S. military is looking at a region and they say, okay, we're going to put boots on the ground, before we can show up, let's look at the pie chart of the population. And the pie chart is of course going to be complex, but it's going to be made up of human beings. Humans equal human terrain.
Right.
In other words, they equal the human domain. So that's what this term means. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please again get a hold of this term. Human domain is the new strategy. In the military traditional phases that we just read, the 5 phases, the military figured, okay, before we show up with boots on the ground, we don't want them stepping on landmines and roadside bombs. So why don't we first try to eliminate the troublemakers before we even show up? In order to do that, we have to, you see, Doug, in the past, whenever it was a theater of nation against nation, what did we usually do? Bombing sorties, right? Ordnance,
that's right.
Thousands of missions. You just bomb them to kingdom come. You destroy everything. Well, when it's a nation that is a region that isn't a theater involving the nation or a state, the leadership of the state, but where it's a region that have actors that are living in that state, then the mission changes. You need to know where the targets are, and in order to do that, you need to know where these troublemakers live. Very important. And we've already seen the videos, the infrared videos. They'll show some person walking in Iraq, the green, and they're glowing. And in YouTube, you've seen those videos, and then the bomb explodes them and kills them, or they'll be in a convoy. That's what we're talking about here. They have to know the targets, the exact targets. Now, in the past, snipers took care of this, but in the future, it's going to be a combination of snipers and drones and GPS and all of the fun toys that the U.S. military has to eliminate the targets. But how do you know what the targets are? Here's where Phase 0 is. Before Phase 1 can start, you have to find out the targets. That's the phase before Phase 1. So how do they do it? This is the part that's disturbing, Doug. In order for Phase 0 to occur, it requires individuals who are in the employ of the U.S. military, and they can be either direct government employees in the Army or Special Forces or any of the other branches, or they can be contractors. Now, in my research, I found out that there seems to be a trend of many contracts. I talked to you about this beforehand, Doug, on the phone.
Right. Yep.
And we're going to get to that in a moment. But a lot of government contractors are hiring this job position, human terrain experts. So it is required that human terrain experts who are specialists, who understand profiling, who understand how to find intelligence and how to get to the source of various groups, insurgent groups, they know how to infiltrate. They are trained to become immersed in a region and to find out who the actors are that are the insurgents or against the occupation. They know how to become part of the groups and to make themselves a recruit to those groups. They learn how to become friends. It's what we see, and Doug, we talked about this in the old days, the drug, DEA,
yep,
narcotics officers.
Yep, this exactly. Yep, this is pretty much out of that playbook where, you befriend a user, you get that user to introduce you to his dealer, and up the chain you go until you can't go any further. But along the line, you collect the data, the information. You assess the structure of the group or of that line of that person's people. And trust me when I say this. In the case that you're talking about with respect to patriot groups, man, there's folks you will know. The biggest recruiter, the people with the biggest mouths out there are the patriot groups, because they want to recruit and change the hearts and minds of people. It's very easy to identify the members of the patriot groups and the conservatives. Or I'll just say this: it's very easy to identify those people who will not go along with the junk that they're pulling right now.
So thus far, Doug, some of the human terrain teams, because I want to use proper research scholarship here. Some of the human terrain teams are embedded, in the case of Iraq and Afghanistan, they are embedded anthropologists. And I notice it's very interesting that when you look at the job description of a human terrain expert, the requirements are the same. They want the person to be very educated, to be very smart, and usually they are required to have either a master's degree or a PhD in anthropology, meaning they understand humans from the inside out. They know sociology. They are social scientists, so they know people. And in Iraq and Afghanistan, these human terrain experts who are a part of human terrain teams dressed up in camel gear. They were not armed, but they were embedded with the special forces and the soldiers, and their job was to go into the village and get to know the people and learn the culture, and also, in addition to that, take names and gather intel. Now, the Army will say, the Special Forces will say, the Marines will say that they were not used to gather intel because that wouldn't be wrong. That's ethically wrong to use scientists to gather that, because anthropologists should not be used for war efforts. And the Association of Anthropologists is struggling with, by the way, this concept. There are some people who are educated. There are websites about it. You can research and find out. In fact, there's a website of an individual who is not happy at all with this that is going on, and his website is called zeroanthropology.net. So if you're taking notes, he has many stories and links about how this is unethical to use anthropologists, because the knowledge, for those that, it's kind of like this, Doug. Did you ever see the movie? You said you didn't see Avatar, right? But if you've seen the movie Avatar, no. In the movie Avatar, the elite, the rich elite went to this planet and they wanted to mine the minerals from the planet. And this planet was populated by these blue creatures, these aliens, and they didn't like being occupied. They were kind of like the Native Americans, so to speak. So to protect the mining operation, the mining company employed the Marines from planet Earth to protect them. And the Marines loved to do target practice on these aliens, but in addition to using Marines, they also brought in anthropologists who tried to understand the aliens, to make friends with them so that the aliens would not be at war with them. So in the movie, there's two battles going on between the anthropologists and the Marines. The Marines are trigger happy. The anthropologists did not want to see the the aliens killed. And that was the conflict of the stories. And it's the same way now in Iraq and Afghanistan. Anthropologists who are part of human terrain teams are noticing that their profiling and their gathering of information is being used to make targets, and they don't like this. So
they're not only profiling the population, but they're identifying specific, as you said, specific targets, contrary to what their ethics would, licensing and the professional ethics would dictate. And that's the thing. And I should mention this: while people are up in arms over, look at all of the contracts going out for requests for bids going out to the subcontractors, or Blackwater, for example. Or look at all of these crisis actors being recruited. Yeah, that's what you're seeing. But what you're not seeing is what Nathan is telling you. No, that's not. You shouldn't be paying. I mean, pay attention to that, sure. But what's really the crux of this is exactly what Nathan's saying. The more dangerous aspect of this are the professionals who are they're trained to infiltrate the mass data and ultimately identify targets. So go ahead.
Now,
sir.
Doug, thanks for saying that, because for those that are listening to this and you might be confused and you're saying, Nathan, I don't care about scientists and PhDs and anthropologists. What's up with the Blackhawks? Here's what's going on, folks. And I'm going to say this, but then I'm going to also continue explaining the nuts and bolts under the hood. The Blackhawks that are showing up in the downtown areas of various cities already, and the Blackhawks that are going to show up are practicing extracting the people that have already been targeted and profiled. So the big question that must be asked, and the big question that is not being asked right now, Doug, is, okay, those helicopters are, I see that video where the people are walking across the street in the crosswalk, the crisis actors. The question that must be asked, Doug, is how did they figure out to arrest those ones? How did they get their address? How did they find out who they are? What information was used to determine that, to make the decision? So when we're watching the exercises, what we're watching is the end result of the data gathering. And ladies and gentlemen, the data gathering is going to be the process that is going to place your name in their database for extraction. The data gathering process is going to be used to either successfully nab well-meaning Christians and patriots and constitutionalists, or it will not, because they knew about the data gathering strategy. So what I'm saying right here, Doug, is I'm exposing this method so that then, ladies and gentlemen, every one of you that are listening, your group needs to come up with a counter strategy for this. Your group needs to come out with a way to not be on the list. Your group needs to come up with a way to act wiser than possibly you're acting already. And Doug, I've seen some videos already, and people are foaming at the mouth and getting angry. And I'm not going to put up with this. You know what you just did? What did they do, Doug?
You played right into the hands of this. You identified yourself as a high priority target by the I'll just say anthropologists, but the scientists, but by the people who are seeking to identify and to submit that information to the people who are going to extract the angry people.
Exactly. So what does this mean? As you just stated, Doug, you practice for where you're going to be. These people that they say, in fact, in the press release, it says they're going to try to mingle with the population and go move around unnoticed. That right there tells us that they're infiltrating. They're practicing infiltration techniques. And if you find out that you made them out of uniform.
That's right.
So this exercise is to see if they can infiltrate. So what's going to happen in the future, or let me mention something else. What is already taking place, Doug? And we're going to talk about that in a moment, because I spoke with you off the air about this. In the future, if not already, they're going to infiltrate the population of the United States of America. And over time, these human terrain experts are going to gather data and information on all the pertinent people in your area. They're going to gather information on civilians who are going to cause problems for the Army's mission, for martial law's mission, for the government's mission, for tyranny's mission, for the New World Order's goal of martial law. They want to know who the problem people are beforehand. So they're going to infiltrate right now, and they're going to take names, and the job of these data gatherers, these anthropologists, these human terrain experts, is to mingle, to go to meetings, to attend all the gatherings that are being recruited openly on social media and Facebook. Hey, we're the Michigan militia, we're the Texas militia, we're the Florida militia. We're taking recruits. Come join us. Okay. Oh, well, that was easy. So these data gatherers are going to join and show up with their new identity, with their pretend identity, and they're either their disguise or their new accent. They're going to have all their papers in order. They're going to have the new ID, the new driver's license. In the event that someone wants to do a check on them, that's easy to take care of, Doug. Now, we know that. The government can do that very easy. So they're going to go in and gather data. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to mention this. People might ask why, for example, there's interagency cooperation where in the past there hasn't been this level of interagency cooperation, meaning the intelligence and military. Well, the intelligence agencies create what are called legends, and that these legends hold up to scrutiny. For example, if a CIA agent, they've got multiple identities, each one for a separate purpose. I mean, for example, you call the CIA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you ask for a Jane Smith. Well, obviously that's not a real name. It's going to be a different name than that, but that same Jane Smith might be Mary Jones elsewhere and Catherine whatever elsewhere. So I guess what I'm saying is that they are creating legends to hold up to the scrutiny of the vetting process of the Patriot groups and inserting these people into the Patriot groups if they haven't already been inserted as part of this operation that everyone's so focused on the shiny trinkets and the flashbang, they're not seeing the mechanics that Nathan's explaining behind the scenes.
Well, Doug, let's talk about the flashbang. And I included this in my notes, and if you want to see it, I have the link to it. It says new budget, new strategy. It goes down. The Chinese, by the way, Jade Helm, people are trying to decode it. Is it China? Well, Jade's from China, so is China involved at the helm and control? Is that all it means? Does it mean that China's going to come in there with their troops and that's a little wink hint, or is there more to it? Well, when we look at, and by the way, Doug, side note, I've read a lot of white papers over the last few weeks about this, and there'll be a bibliography usually at the bottom of these military, joint operations, Army, Special Forces, joint white papers. You can find them all over the Internet, and the bibliography many times will include The Art of War from Sun Tzu, the Chinese strategist from many years ago. Yep. I mean, that thing's brilliant, right? So there is a literary book called The 36 Stratagems of War, and it's a collection of 36 stratagems that are useful in war, and some of the Chinese scholars argue whether it was Sun Tzu or someone else or a combination of several very wise people, but he is attributed to have written it. Possibly it was someone else, or possibly as a combination. Nevertheless, one of the stratagems is tossing out a brick to get a jade gem, which means, and I have it right here, you bait someone by making him believe that he will gain something, or just make him react. Hence, Doug, what you said, the flashbang, the Black Hawks in the middle of town, it's to cause a reaction. So you do this, you bait him, you throw a brick or a Black Hawk helicopter in the middle of a downtown city to obtain something valuable from him in return. In other words, the jade gem. So the Black Hawks that are landing in the middle of the city are being used to get a response, Doug. And
exactly.
How many people are playing right into it right now?
Quite a few. See, and it's not just the high-profile or higher-profile people in the alternative media. Now this is drawing out the people that have up to this point been relatively quiet and unidentified, or at least questionable in terms of their intent.
Exactly. Now, let's move into the territory of what happens to the information. In my research, I was able to uncover several white papers as well as some news reports over the last few years. Now, this concept has been around since approximately 2006, possibly even before that with a different name. But 2006, 2007, it really got going. And then over the last few years, they've tested it in Iraq and Afghanistan. And also, let me say this, Doug, I believe it's already in force here in America. They're using it already. But in the information that has come forth, and when you read the white papers about the strategy, the job of the human terrain expert is to gather the data, and every night they insert it into their computer and turn it in to their commanders, to the brigade commanders or those in charge. And according to the way they have it worded, it says they turn it in to the commanders for, quote-unquote, decision-making. Right. Now, it's very important to consider those words, decision-making. It doesn't say to be thought about or digested or incubated with a team of that use the Constitution to come up with a plan or make decisions. It doesn't say the Constitution is involved. It says to military commanders for decision-making. Now, we know that in the theater of war, when you're in the mode of war, throw human rights out the window. Of course, we have the Geneva Convention, which is a joke now. People don't follow it. But during war, the commanders decide who is going to live and who's going to die. They decide who to dial in for the next drone attack. They decide who is going to be exploded that night. They decide which wedding or funeral to blow up or which convoy to blow up. It's their decision. So when the human terrain teams turn in the information, now let's talk about America. For decision-making, then the decision is going to be made to do something with the individuals in the database. Now, let's use a fictional character living in the middle of, let's use Kansas, Leavenworth, Kansas, as an example, because the training center for human terrain teams exists in Leavenworth, Kansas. That's where it is for the Army.
Okay.
And the anthropologists, the PhDs go there, and I don't know how long it lasts, but they're taught how to profile, how to immerse themselves, and how to fit in and how to gather data. They're taught everything. And then the final test is they go into Leavenworth, Kansas, and they're supposed to mingle and infiltrate into the population of Leavenworth. By the way, folks, if you live there, this is going on. And their job is to infiltrate groups and citizens without being found out, and then to come back with their information of who they profiled. And then they turn it in to their teacher, and the teacher goes over and says, oh, very well done, good. So let's say that there's a patriot group, a real patriot group in Kansas, and they're supposed to go in there and find the information. Well, the data that they gather is going to have a breakdown of that group. It's going to have the main participants. It's going to have the leadership, who the brains behind the operation is, the people that are funding it. It's going to initially give preference to the different targets in that group if they are going to be a troublemaking group with the coming operation. So in the case of America, how do they deal with that? Well, the decision-making takes place where they will finally say, okay, John Doe is going to be a problem, so we're going to have to deal with him. So how do they do that, Doug? Do they announce to everybody? Do they put a bulletin on the news? Do they get a billboard? Do they put it on Facebook and a social media post, or go to a forum and say, John Doe is one of our targets and we're going to extract him? Of course they don't. Are they going to show up when he's having a meeting? If he's a militia member and if he's training with his friends?
Not unless they want a confrontation. It depends on the psychology of the operation, but what you're talking about, Nathan, no, they don't want that. They want to do it by stealth, by surprise, and based on quite a bit of already collected data, and by people who are well established and well embedded.
Okay, now here's the thing that's very important to get a hold of, ladies and gentlemen. I know that there are many well-meaning people that say, I'm going to defend this country to my last drop of blood, to my last breath. And you mean it, and I believe you will. But the scenario that most people are planning for is the traditional scenario that militia people are practicing for.
Right.
Where possibly the Red Dawn thing, Doug, they sit at the top of a hill and they ambush the convoy. We're going to get them, and we're ready. Well, before that convoy shows up, that's level 1 and 2, or phase 1, 2, and 3. That convoy is a future phase. Before that convoy shows up, Doug, they want to know who the person is that wants to sit at the top of the hill, and they go in phase 0, and that's what the Black Hawk does. It takes care of them.
Right. And just to be clear, Nathan, just so people don't get the wrong idea, I don't think you're saying this. I don't think Jade Helm 15 necessarily you're saying, look, this is the exercise that's going to make this, everything's going to culminate with this exercise. What this is doing is advancing an agenda that has been in play for some time. Now we're seeing the eye candy, the flashbang stuff, to program everyone around us to see the military assets in the streets, but and that perhaps is a diversion. As you said earlier at the onset of the program, could this go live? Well, perhaps, but it doesn't matter because it's the operational tactics. That's what we really need to focus on.
The flashbang is to intimidate the majority of the population, to pacify them, to intimidate them, to let them know, hey, our guns are bigger than yours, and we have night vision, you don't. The majority of the population is okay with that because they'll say, well, what's there to fear? I'm not a troublemaker. But the people who see what time it is are able to see this as a threat, and it stirs them, so then they become stirred. So the ones that are agitated are the ones that are going to show themselves as the target in phase 0. So when the information is gathered and it's given to the commanders for decision-making, Doug, let's talk about the decision-making that has taken place in the past. In essence, the decision is not determined by the laws of the citizen or the area, but instead it's going to be decided by military tribunal. And while military tribunal is useful during warfare against opposition soldiers and military members, tribunals are also going to be used when tyranny comes against civilians. And the tribunals are going to be absent, this is important, Doug, of justice through the common laws of the nation, of the Constitution.
Right. Yep.
That's what tribunals are. One guy decides. It's not a jury of your peers. So when a person is profiled to be a troublemaker, they don't get to have recourse and say, no, I'm not. Prove it. That's not even part of the equation. If someone is suspected or alleged to be a troublemaker, then the decision-making will happen. For example, what we see in those Taliban, those civilians or soldiers that in the infrared, we see it on YouTube all the time, they're exploded with a drone or a bomb. Did that person have a chance to argue his point or from his perspective? Hey, are you sure I'm guilty before you blow me up? No. That's what war does, though. You blow things up and the ashes will settle the score, and that's one of the ugly parts of war. It's not always fair. If the shoe fits, it's easy to say it, but that doesn't mean it does fit. So, as I mentioned, some of the tactics that we're going to see are borrowed from the past. Now, I see what time it is. We're at the top of the hour. Do you want to take a break, Doug? And then we're going to go into some of the dirty parts of what's coming. I'm going to stop right here.
Yeah. Let's do that now. And a lot of information, folks. I think if you really understand what Nathan is saying, I think you're really going to see the insidious nature, the multi-level aspects of what we're seeing take place, not just in the several states in the Southwest, but all across the United States and what has been going on for some time. Again, Nathan Leal, a lot of research, a lot of great information. Watchmanscry.com. Go to watchmanscry.com or we've got a link.
The edition of the Hagmann Hagmann Report today is Friday, April 3rd, 2015. Nathan Leal is our guest. His website is watchmanscry.com. If you're joining us late, you're going to want to listen to the whole episode. But you go to Nathan's website, watchmanscry.com. Go to, on the right-hand side, show notes under this Jade Helm show notes. And we're talking tonight about Operation Jade Helm, the human terraining system, phase 0 shaping, and what the powers that be are doing with these exercises, projecting power and data gathering through labeling and many other factors that are done through human what they call HUMIT intelligence units. But with that, Nathan,
don't watch with the right hand. Don't watch where they're pointing you and telling you to watch. It's what you're not supposed to see. That's what's important.
Indeed, gentlemen. And I want to just point out in my notes, Doug, if you scroll down, it talks about the recent NDAA budget passed,
yes.
I believe, was it December? And, it's real interesting, Doug, when we did an end-of-the-year program in the middle of December a few months back, we talked about this, but at that time I didn't know it was going to turn into this. But even still, the NDA budget has included in it in Section 1074, and I have the link right here, part of the budget. It says a pilot program for the human terrain system. That's in the budget. This section would require the Secretary of the Army to conduct a pilot program to utilize human terrain system assets in the United States Pacific Command Area of Responsibility to support Phase 0 shaping operations and to support the theater security cooperation plans of the geographic combatant commander. Now, it was budgeted for Pacific Command to do this pilot program, but what's Jade Helm? Because Jade Helm is exactly this. So is Jade Helm part of this operation or this budget, or was that basically the go-ahead or the announcement that that's where we are now? We're going to now start using this new method. But nevertheless, the thing that's very disturbing about this, Doug, now let's talk about human nature, because human nature must always be included in the equation when we're considering the future course of a nation, or the decisions that are going to be made, or government policy, or just basically the way that people behave. If Jesus said in his prophecy in Matthew 24 that many are going to betray, that means that people are going to go against their human nature to be a loyal friend, and they're going to betray one another. That's not good, but how do we get there? What would cause people to betray one another? What causes people to behave in a manner that goes against their fiber or their conscience? How do you convince people that doing wrong is okay? Now, when we look at history...
I'm sorry. I was just going to say hunger, thirst, fear. Hunger, thirst, fear. Promises of a better life when, in fact, that's not going to exist. I mean, there are so many avenues to appeal to so many characters, character traits, and they've got them all covered. Go ahead, sir. Exactly.
Promises are made, or deals are made, or maybe rewards are offered, or exchanges are offered. Whatever the method is, Satan will use whatever method is required at the time to convince people to do what goes against their grain. And we need to look no further than the Nazi Party and what Hitler's entire army did, what his killers did, and those internment camp leaders and commanders and the soldiers. And Doug, what does it take to get a normal person that is raised on a farm and likes animals and means well and goes to church, a German citizen, and turns him into a year or two later into someone that's able to do the atrocities that we saw? What does it take to get a person to do that? Brainwashing, slow brainwashing, quick brainwashing, ideology changes, lack of fundamental foundational beliefs.
We saw this in the the Milgram experiments back in the 60s. I might have slaughtered that name, but the experimentation that we saw with the torture back in the early 1960s by universities. It's crazy. I mean, you're correct, but I just want to throw that in there. I mean, this is not new by any stretch of the imagination, but this is certainly being currently exploited. Go ahead.
And that experiment that you're referencing, is that the one where the peer pressure convinced some of the
candidates to torture someone else just because they were told to do it? And peer pressure did it, or
well, it was.
Is that the one you're talking about?
The appearance of an authority figure. These volunteers, one in one room, one in another. The one in one room, an authority figure would say, electrocute the person for giving a wrong answer, for example, and turn up the voltage. When, of course, it was all fake. I mean, it was all set up. However, the whole thing was to see how the person, the volunteer operative, would react to the fake authority figure. And in the majority of cases, in fact, they had to stop the experiment early because it was widely effective. I mean, it was unbelievably effective. So,
and humans can be convinced to do horrible things if you have the right atmosphere. And what I'm trying to say, Doug, is they have this down to a science. They have it all figured out with citing your experiment right there and others that have taken place. When we see the what type of aptitude did it take, or atmosphere or environment, to get a normal person to be a soldier that obeyed commands to do horrible things? What does it take? Well, I don't know all the ingredients. We mentioned some of them, but it's a lot of very nefarious ingredients. It's deception, it's peer pressure, it's the fear of insubordination or wanting to obey or wanting to fit in or be approved. Basically, worrying about yourself, isn't it? So for the people that have fear and they're not where they're supposed to be when it comes to what the Bible tells us we're supposed to be, you're going to betray and hurt others. And we have seen this take place in the past. And I included a reference to, and Doug, let's talk about the Phoenix program and the Vietnam War, the CORDS program. I have it here. During Vietnam, they used a preliminary version of human terrain mapping and infiltration to try to combat the guerrillas, the Viet Cong, and to try to eliminate the problems that were, of course, fighting against our soldiers, so, laying down mines and walking up to them with bombs. So they tried to profile all the villages and find out who the troublemakers were. So it was a similar program. Unfortunately, the motivation behind it and the requirements and the quotas that were included in this program in Vietnam required that the assassins, and by the way, let me include this, the CIA sent in infiltrators and intelligence gatherers and also assassins to take names and then assassinate civilians. Not soldiers, civilians. So the quota required that so many people in the village needed to die every month. And, I mean, Doug, when there's a quota and you're at the end of the month and, hey, I need to kill 150 more people, what do I do? Well, let me just load up and have target practice. Or let's just have some fun.
There's this lack of discretion that suddenly envelops that whole thing. And for the people who don't know what this is, the Phoenix program, the CIA designed and implemented the Phoenix program during the Vietnam War to coordinate, to better coordinate the attack on the political and military leadership of the Viet Cong, as Nathan stated. However, it was really one small aspect of a larger initiative that was extra, well outside of the purview of the public, and it was a covert operation. Predecessors to the Phoenix program included PT-4, I-6, and both, by the way, CIA programs designed to coordinate and plan attacks on the Viet Cong. And I just want to mention that because this is nothing new. See, the playbooks are not changed. No one has thought up brand new ways to do things. No, they're refining their old ways.
Thank you, Doug. Now, to look at the Phoenix program is disturbing, Doug, because it was sanctioned by the American government. Of course, CIA has their nefarious things they do. That's their job, to be nefarious and do horrible things. But it was the United States of America that sanctioned it and funded it and did it. And I have included a few excerpts from the Wikipedia page, which does have citations, by the way. So if folks say, well, Wikipedia, really, Nathan? No, this thing has citations. It has a paper trail. This took place. And I included some of the citations of what it did. And Doug, do you see them right there about the program? Can you go ahead and share that?
Okay. I said yes very quickly. Are you talking about? Give me
It has a logo on my page of notes about this program. The program was designed.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you know what? I just yeah.
The logo.
Okay. Sorry about that. I think I faded out there for a second. The program is designed to identify and neutralize via infiltration, capture, terrorism, torture, and assassination the infrastructure of the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam. That's what you're referring to, right, Nathan?
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is backed up by numerous post event analyses. Okay, so and just like Germany, the results were analyzed by our government. The CIA described it as a set of programs that sought to attack and destroy the political infrastructure of the Viet Cong, and many of these people were taken to interrogation centers, where many were tortured in an attempt to gain intelligence on VC activities in the area. What this means, if you match this up to the other studies or the revelatory documents, is that it didn't matter. You could, as Nathan and I talked off air, they could have grabbed a guy off the street, and just because, hey, I don't want to be, I don't want my fingernails ripped off or battery cables tied to my, what's. Okay, I'm going to turn in my neighbor, regardless of what my neighbor's doing, and then bang, that neighbor is worm food. Sorry to be so blunt, but that's the bottom line. That this is an integral part of, and the least known part of what we're seeing develop here in the United States via Jade Helm and others. Did I do okay? How's that?
And Doug, the number of people who, according to them, successfully neutralized, almost 82,000 on the books, of which 41,000 were killed. And how many of them were innocents? The methods of the torture that was used on them, let me just read this. This is what happened, Doug. So I don't want to pretend and whitewash this. Let me just read it. Rape, gang rape using eels, snakes, hard objects, rape followed by murder, electric shock, rendered by attaching wires to the genitals or other sensitive parts of the body, like the tongue, the water treatment, the airplane in which the prisoner's arms were tied behind the back, and a rope looped over the hook in the ceiling suspended the prisoner in midair, after which he or she was beaten, beatings with rubber hoses and whips, the use of police dogs to maul prisoners. Horrible, unspeakable things, but as some people would say, Nathan, that was just those weird people that end up in the CIA. That's a very minor part of the population. Most people wouldn't do that. That's not include everybody, and we would never do some things like that again. If that's the truth, Doug, as you scroll down, Abu Ghraib.
Oh, yeah?
And, when that first came out, Doug, I was so ashamed of my rah-rah, blind, 100% not holding to the standard or the plumb line, my attitude toward our American military, because I had the attitude that we were perfect, every soldier's a Christian, we would never do any atrocities, never. But when I saw what happened at Abu Ghraib, I was so ashamed of, first of all, my ignorance, and I was grieved that we would do such things because I knew what it meant. Doug, we sow what we reap. And we can look at the book of Revelation. It says, what Babylon has done to the earth, repay her double the cup of the wrath of God. So the atrocities are still remembered. They do not go silent. They're not quieted. They have not been forgotten by God. And there is a time where we're going to all pay for the atrocities that we have done. Now, again, if people say, well, that was just a small group of people that were under orders, which is true, I blame, at the top of the chain, I blame Rumsfeld for this, Doug. The very top.
Rumsfeld and others, look, I got a list of people, including Rumsfeld, and the people that don't get their hands dirty, like the Kissingers and Brzezinskis, the world planners and the Clintons and the other people, they're enjoying this as well. But Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, others, Joe and I have done programs on this. Yeah, I blame them too.
Okay, so question. Did the Geneva Convention exist when this went on? Yes. Did the soldiers know about it? Well, I believe that's part of military training. So how did they get past it and step over it? It was because they were ordered. So orders, as you stated in that college test, will make people do things that beforehand they would not do. And that's my point in this. I'm not trying to isolate these people and say they're horrible. They were following orders, Doug. And
I'm pretty sure, because I've seen some of the testifying after the fact. Many of them, after they got away from it and looked back, they're embarrassed and they're remorseful about it. They can't believe they did it. Maybe not all of them, but some are. They don't know. What do you do when you're surrounded by peer pressure and the ranking brass tells you that's your job? Unless you want to end up in Leavenworth,
but you know what, Nathan? After our phone conversation earlier before the program, I had done some research, and you had touched on this earlier in the program. You had talked about millennials, and if you look at the composition of the rank and file military, okay, we've got an issue right now because the rank and file military are younger in terms of their average age. Now, having said that, you've got this limited worldview of plus their results of the result of a very skewed education. And having said that, they're deprogrammed in boot camp. They're deprogrammed in all of their military programs. Then add into that the mercenaries, the mercs, the people for hire, and the CIA, the intelligence operations. That's a very deadly mix because you've got the grunts to carry out the orders. You've got the real sadistics behind the orchestration of the planning, and then you've got the mid-level people who are in it for the money, and of course are not going to question, and are pretty morally, intellectually, and generally pathetically bankrupt in all areas of their lives. This is which also addresses the military replacements of late, well, throughout the last 6-7 years anyway, as well as the shakeup in the CIA. And you have low morale in the older people, and you've got this sense of we can do anything in the younger crowd. I just want to bring that out because that's what I found after our conversation.
And Doug, sadly, this is the part that it's one of the saddest narratives of our country. Sadly, the well-meaning men and women who participate in some of these things, they didn't sign up to do that, but they do. When they come back, Doug, one of the highest mortality rates is in the U.S. military. Suicide is at the very top because they cannot deal with the things they had to participate in, the guilt, the remorse. It's horrible what our government does to innocent young men and women, forcing them to do things that are unspeakable. And that's why in the Vietnam War we saw so many people living under bridges. They could not deal with what they had to do, and no one understood the pain they were going through. And it's just sad. It is.
That's right.
It's so sad. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not throwing rocks at the lower-ranking individuals who had to actually be the people on the ground doing these things because they're just fodder themselves. And we're watching how the government treats them when they get home. It's horrible, which, by the way, they're going to be a part of the gathering as well because they're not happy with what's going on. And I'm pretty sure, Doug, there's a lot of them that are also on the list when this extraction happens. But the reason I bring this up, the reason I'm bringing up the Phoenix program and what happens in Abu Ghraib is because that is a snapshot or a milepost or an example to prove that people, that our boys, our women, men and women in uniform will follow orders and do things that they're not supposed to. So for we who are saying, our military is made up of a lot of good, well-meaning people. Doug, you described it so great when just now when you talked about the millennials who do not have the same perspective as the older ones. That's why they're eliminating the older ones. I've spoken to several people that are enlisted who have been in the military for 15, 20 years, and they have told me that the new crop that's coming in, the freshman class that's coming in, are not the same breed.
Right,
They're
exactly.
Not. They're arrogant. They don't know the Constitution. They don't understand authority. They're rebellious, and they don't have the same standard, Doug. So when we look at the future of America, the Bible tells us eventually at some point many are going to be betrayed, and they're going to deliver you up. That means it's going to happen throughout the world, including America. So for it to happen in America, there's going to be a shift in the methods that the military is going to use to deliver people up. And then at that point, all of the female camps that we've heard about and the internment camps are going to finally have their visitors, and they're going to be employed. Now, I also included in my notes something that is kind of touchy, Doug.
All right.
And it says forget the rules right here. And ladies and gentlemen, I am not in the habit of slandering others, and I'm not sharing this information to slander others or speak bad things about the dead. I'm not doing that. I am just sharing what is part of public information. It's already established. It's all over. You can find it. I've noticed, by the way, one of the top grossing movies this year is The American Sniper. And for the people who want to believe that America is the land of Mayberry and only Andy joins and, Gomer Pyle are the only ones in our military and they're all good old boys and they would never do bad, I've noticed that's the persona that's being given to Mr. Chris Kyle,
right?
The late Chris Kyle. And I'm not saying he's good or bad. I'm not saying that. But I am seeing that he's almost being deified. Let's be honest here, Doug. And if anyone wants to question his motives, I've seen the comments. People get mad. The corn-fed Americans get mad. Don't you speak of him. He's a hero. Okay? If that's true that Chris Kyle is a hero, why did he say that he participated in sniping from the top of the roof of the Superdome 30 looters during Katrina? Why did he say that? Why was he okay with saying that?
Yeah, that's really the first I heard of that. When you pointed this out to me, I did not know that before. And if that's the case, if that's true, if in fact he did do that, then we've got much. I mean, think about that, folks. I mean, think about that. As you put it right here, it's not lawful for him to do that. Now, that's I'm not trying to say I agree with looting, but wow, really?
If it's true, Doug, and if some people, by the way, you can find it all over. I have two links right here. One from NPR, one from CNN. Well, hey, that's CNN. You can't trust them. Okay, then find another source. It's all over the place. All right. If this is true, and I read some of the comments in these stories, and the comments are by the Mayberry RFD Americans who say if he did that, he had a reason to do it, or it was okay, or they're justifying it. It's cognitive dissonance. I don't want to hear that it's against the rules because he's my hero, so don't say otherwise. People cannot get past that, Doug. So what does that illustrate? Whether or not it happened, Doug, I saw comment after comment from Americans saying it was okay. They're justifying it, which means that regular Americans are going to justify the extraction of well-meaning patriots in the future because
exactly
it's going to be packaged correctly. And that's all you need to convince the majority of the people that it's okay. All you need to do is package it correctly and label the people as being some sort of dissenters against the government. That's all you need to do. Or you need to blame them for something.
Right. And if I can just add to that, folks, it's not what Nathan is saying here, and I have to agree with him. It's not in this case the story or even the veracity of the story. That's not what we're looking at. It's the sentiment behind the comments to the story, to the account. That should tell you a lot of what you need to know. That when things are presented to this demographic of people, that hey, these constitutionalists, they're really gumming the works up, or these people who are complaining about abortion, or look at the intolerance of those speaking out against the homosexuals, or what about going to the Constitution? It doesn't matter. It's the comments, folks. Again, take your eyes off the story for a moment. Look at the comments. That's what Nathan, I believe, is saying, and I certainly would echo that.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Whether or not the story is true, go to the comment, read the comments, or look from a different source. I don't know if it's true or not, and that part really doesn't matter. Where it does, but the sentiment, the sympathizing that goes on with the atrocity that it is for a U.S. soldier to snipe. If it's true, Doug, while he's enlisted, stateside, American citizens, sniping American citizens, 30 of them, I mean, how many rules does that break right there? And if people are able to hear that and overlook it and not be bothered by it, what does that tell us about the population? And because of that, that's why everyone needs to be concerned. Because when it's time to start delivering up, as Jesus said, many will betray one another. You know, DHS, Homeland Security, has on their homepage, if you see something, say something. Here's the 800 number. Many will betray one another. I don't like that guy. He had played, his dog barks, his music's loud. I want to call the 800 number on him. And then before you know it, they show up and they kick in the door because they need something to do and to justify their MRAPs, and that's what they do. So in the future, Doug, there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a spirit of deception and a spirit of betrayal. It's already arriving. Now, how do you convince people to be okay with, they have a block party a week before and their neighbor introduces himself and the kids play together, but a week later that same family is labeled to be an insurgent or a terrorist or just a bad man, so he got raided and arrested. Do the neighbors question it? Will they?
No, you know what? No, because look, in their worldview, which they were programmed to believe, they deserved it. They were causing all of the trouble of the block. I mean, can you imagine them hoarding food? Can you imagine them storing that ammunition in their house? Can you imagine the fact that they had all that money in their home safe or whatever, their mattress or whatever, and look, they're part of causing the economy to fall, or they're part of the whatever.
And Doug, we needed to look no further. The Boston bombing, Tamerlan and his little brother on the loose, on public enemy number one, shut down Boston, martial law, house to house, all that stuff. And they were under siege for a few days. And the narrative stated that Tamerlan and his brother were responsible. Of course, anyone that evaluates the situation sees a lot of holes in the official story. But nevertheless, they labeled Tamerlan as being bad. So when they turned him into a pincushion and his brother, they were trying to kill him, and several versions, they machined him down, they ran over him. However they did it, how much of the American public had a problem with it? They were glad. They had no problem because as long as they were labeled, that means they were bad.
Well, and that's it. Okay, you're looking at this threat, and boy, Nathan. I mean, we yes, that perfect example. But look at the number of examples, folks. That's just one Nathan's talking about. Look at the numerous examples that have happened over the last just couple of years.
Side note, Doug, food for thought. The creativity of the powers that be with their nefarious alphabet soup groups who plan and execute these type of exercises, i.e. the Boston bombing, or Boris Nemtsov, the person against Putin who got mowed down while he was on a date. Interesting food for thought, Doug. Guess what? The accused person for the Boston bombing, his name is Tamerlan. The person that allegedly killed Boris Nemtsov in Russia, his name is Tamerlan. That odd name. You would have thought that the creativity could have been a little better than that, but hey, what do we name him, or who do we blame? Let's blame. Okay.
Are they attempting to? I mean, that's a very ethnic name from a very specific region. Are they attempting to vilify the region as well as the ethnos, shall we say? I mean,
I have no idea. I just noticed it. So if someone wants to take that one and decode it, I just found it a little bit interesting.
Indeed,
but
it is.
Moving forward in the remaining minutes that we have, Doug, let's talk about this operation of human terrain experts and how what the future of it holds. This a temporary thing, or is it the new face of the American military? And how do we deal with this thing? In the last remaining minutes, let's talk about this. Because as we stated from the very beginning of this program, the flashbang of the Black Hawks right now are stirring up the crowd. They're stirring up the alternative media, and people are saying this is it, this is martial law. If that's the case, let's entertain that one for a moment. Doug, if that is the case, and the Blackhawks are going to be showing up nationwide, that means the infiltration has already been going on for the last 6 months to 2 years. Because according to the official documents, the infiltrators go in that envelope of time, between 6 months and 2 years. That job, by the way, and I end my notes with that on the very bottom of my page, there are many companies that are hiring these.
Yep.
And if you Google or use Bing or Start Pages, human terrain jobs, type in Florida and look what you get. Type in Virginia, look what you get. Washington, California. You will get a lot of hits, but they are not always State Department. They are oftentimes contractors that are hiring. But when you look at the job description, it's real interesting. They say you must have been trained in human terrain analysis. You have to be a social scientist. You have to be an anthropologist, have a master's or a PhD, and you have to also be able to get a top-secret clearance. You have to be able to work stateside for up to 180 days and possibly overseas for 180 days. So you're going to be on tour, and we're going to send you to different locations. Now, if some of you that are listening, ladies and gentlemen, if you wonder, well, my state, I live in Wyoming, I don't see jobs for Wyoming. Well, the contracting companies, most of them are located in either Washington, D.C., or in the Virginias over there.
Right. Maryland.
There's some in Florida, there's some in California. Yep. There's select areas, but they can send their terrain teams to a given location. So with that said, Doug, now let's talk about the brainstorming session that needs to take place. If the people that are listening to this program say, okay, Nathan, okay, you laid it on the table. I understand this is a threat. How does it affect me? Doug, let's talk about this. Here's how it affects the people, and this is what we need to do as a collective body of freedom-loving Americans, whichever group you might be a part of. Let's just say, Doug, if this thing has already been going on for a year, let's say we know for sure that the human terrain team started to immerse themselves and infiltrate in the past year. That would mean that every group that's out there that assembles and meets and talks about what they want to do, there's a possibility that one of those amongst them is a Judas Iscariot.
Absolutely.
Now, Nathan, are you trying to divide us? Are you really trying to throw a rock and flash and freak us out? You just caused havoc right there. Well, Doug, sorry to say it, but according to everything we've stated, many will betray one another. They will deliver you up. Okay, human terrain teams are intelligence gatherers. Okay, they turn in their information for decision-making. Okay, the Jade Helm exercises are to extract. So if they're going to be extracting people, they're going to extract before the boots are on the ground, meaning this thing's going to happen before we see the big stuff occur. So the ambushes that people are training for right now, or we have our militia group, we're going to ambush them. Well, how are you going to do that if the leader's gone, if he disappeared? And I fully believe that when it's time, Doug, to happen, when it's game on, when they flip the switch, these extraction teams are going to go across the United States, and they're going to have the targets, and they're going to show up in the middle of the night. If the person's a night owl, they're going to show up when he's not ready. They're going to show up when he's asleep or when he's walking his dog and he doesn't come home, and wifey's wondering, hey, where's honey? He didn't come home. They're going to disappear just like the Gestapo did, just like we hear about the disappearances that occurred in Castro's Cuba. I was talking to Augusto Perez, and he said that when he was growing up, he saw the revolution take place, and he remembers how neighbors would just disappear. And it wasn't with a lot of explosions and booms and bullets sounding. One day, they're just gone.
Right.
You don't see them anymore. So that is the same technique that they're going to use. So, ladies and gentlemen, how, and Doug, this is an honest question, how do the freedom lovers of America prepare for that? How do you know when they're going to show up in the middle of the night and you're not wearing your digital camouflage and, you're not armed and ready with your K-bar at your side? That's not when they show up. They show up when you're snoozing and you're foggy and you're not ready. You're wearing your slippers. So when it happens that they show up, they already have your name, Doug. So what do people do?
Well,
how do you counter this?
Well, let me just add this, Nathan, real quick here. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead. How do you counter this? You've got to be extremely vigilant. You've got to place a lot of trust in your discernment by way of the Holy Spirit. But go ahead and fill in the blanks here, buddy.
And that's what I was going to, when I spoke with you off the air, Doug, because honestly, in the natural, when I think about this scenario, my head spins. If it was entrusted to me, and I don't have one, but if I did, let's say I had some guys I got together on the weekends and we, make sure that we can hit the target.
Let's go out and do our survival stuff this weekend, Yeah, I got you.
Okay. If I was part of something like that, or I was the leadership of something like that, and I heard this information, hey, guess what? The the New World Order and Obama's plan, the big plan of the earth, the plantation of the world, is going to, before the bullets start flying and before the fireworks, before shock and awe, they're going to do phase 0, which means before you see the convoys, they're going to get rid of the people looking for the convoys. Their plan does not include having to engage the troublemakers. They're going to get rid of the troublemakers first before the big thing happens. So if that's the case, okay, let's look at the potential. If perchance there are groups out there that have been infiltrated, that means they've already been profiled. The data has already been gathered about everyone in the group already. Listener, if you're in a group, it's been gathered if you've been infiltrated. So what do you do now?
Nathan, let me just say this. It's an incremental process. Everyone's waiting for that big event to take place. Folks, it's already taking place. This is incremental. This is subtle. This is and that's why it's insidious, because it's incremental, subtle. And you know what? The attrition, I believe, has already started. And they're looking for, or they're gauging the reaction. If you look at certain people in the media, as well as certain people in the patriot movements, you'll see if the reputations have not been vilified, some have suffered that way. Others have suffered some interesting accidents and natural deaths. I believe that in the totality, we're seeing the incremental and very subtle testing of responses. But go ahead, sir. I didn't mean to get you off your train of thought there.
Well, Doug, one of the biggest difficulties that I can summarize when I'm examining this whole scenario is if groups who exist right now are hearing this information and they do their own homework and they say, whoa, so, okay, I have 50 people in my group. One of them is a Judas. Okay, but what if they have not been infiltrated yet, but now they're worried, and it's going to cause division. It's going to cause all of them to not trust each other, so there could be breakups, there could be splitting of groups. See, this thing is so brilliant because they want, and they did it on purpose, Doug. They're brilliant at this. They knew that eventually we were going to figure out what human domain meant. Right. And therefore, we were going to figure out that infiltration is going to happen. And that means that they're standing on the sideline and they're saying, watch this. The flashbang that we're really throwing in is in the middle of the group, and now they don't trust each other. So watch them fall apart. And that is also a part of the strategy. So that's why this is so difficult to try to work through. And the only remedy that I can come up with, Doug, and it's what you have mentioned already, is it is so important. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a Christian and you depend on God and the Holy Spirit, then you need to add this to your assignment and your prayer list. We need to start praying. You need to start praying. The people in your group, the church of the body of Christ, needs to start praying that they have the discernment to know what's going on so that they can have the proper radar and intuition to know if there's a false one among them, if there's a chaff among them, if there's a wolf among them. But it's going to be also very important not to falsely accuse. So that's where the Holy Spirit comes in. And, Doug, the early church in the book of Acts had to survive this way. They started out with persecution. They started out with not trusting everybody. The catacombs, how long did the church hide in catacombs? And how were they able to function without getting caught? Well, they had to have the leadership of the Holy Spirit to know who was among them. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, it's so important to have your heart right with God, because if it's clouded with the confusion of failure or the confusion of not being where you're supposed to be, then that's going to interrupt the radar. And just for the record, ladies and gentlemen, we've all been there. We've had our ups and downs. Some of us are at times in a season of strength and then in a season of struggle. But my challenge, Doug, in this message is that now more than ever, we need to get to the point where we are walking side by side with God, and our relationship with Jesus needs to be nurtured and strengthened so that we can have the discernment. Now, for those of you that are able and you understand that God is a supernatural God, God can tell us who's who. God can tell us he's okay, be careful on that one. God can tell us in a variety of ways. God can also do. If you pray and you say, God, if there's a stranger amongst us, or if there's an infiltrator among us, deal with him. Can you make him leave? Can you get rid of him for us? Can you just, we give our situation to you, God, and that's what it's going to take, Doug. It's going to take total 100% trust in trusting in God, as Psalms 91 says, the shelter of the Most High. That means the shelter. And if Psalms 91 is true, which I know it is, and I believe it is, it says he will give his angels charge concerning you. He'll protect you by his angels. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's our homework. Our assignment is to get our lives in order and to work through the struggles that we're having, because, Doug, there's no going back. We are in the twilight zone now. We're in the new America.
Oh, man. You know what, Nathan, I really do think that this is perhaps the most important program you've done. Just to contextualize what Nathan has laid out for us, this has served really as the basis for quite a few programs that have been existing and progressing in the background while the alternative media, and God bless the alternative media, and I mean that sincerely, while they're showing you the white vans and the purple walk of the crisis actors and the Blackhawks, while you're looking at that, your attention is being taken off of what is happening under the surface, the real human domain, phase zero. This is what Nathan has discovered, researched, and proven to be 100% accurate, at least in my research concurrent with his. And I got to tell you, it is insidious. And you're right, Nathan. And I'll say this, God does, he will remove, if you're acting properly, I believe he'll remove people from your midst just as quickly as he'll make better friends for you than you can for yourself.
Indeed, Doug. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, we need to have the mind of Christ in this thing. And I have seen at times people come and go in my circle of friends who at first I thought were okay and safe and loyal, but they turned out to not be for whatever reason. Maybe they got upset, or we didn't see eye to eye, or let me just say it, Doug, as a minister of the gospel, it's part of the job of a minister of the gospel, share things with others if they need to hear it. And one thing that I notice, one of the weaknesses in today's church is that most people, let me take that back. Not most, but I've observed this in a lot of people. A lot of people have a problem with being told or corrected or challenged that something they are allowing in their life shouldn't be, whether it's self-destructive or it's just the wrong direction. Brother, you shouldn't be having that affair. You're destroying your family, things like that. Yep. Well, but they don't want to hear it. And I've encountered people in the past that when I challenged them with the truth, they went ballistic on me and rabid, and the fangs came out. And before I knew it, they hated me, and they left, and they started slandering me on the Internet. And I'm noticing that in the body of Christ. So if you happen to be a member of a group and you wonder about certain people who maybe are not stable, because there's some people that aren't stable out there, Doug. They're well-meaning, but they struggle. because of life. And we know that. We'll leave it at that. But some of the people that are unstable may be confused with being an infiltrator when they're not. So, again, we have to make sure we have the mind of Christ and not label people falsely. So right there, Doug, we have to really have the mind of Christ. Now, I see that we have a couple of minutes. Can I share my prophetic vision? Because if people want to hear it, I'm sure.
Otherwise, I think I'm going to be attacked physically. So please do.
Okay. Now, when I was on the air with Steve Quayle, I shared that I had a prophetic dream where next to my property, I was having a barbecue, and there was a large mountain range to the right or to the east of my property, and there was a flash on the other side of the mountain range, and then a column of smoke came over, and then a chunk of ice. And that was a prophetic image or glimpse of a nuclear bomb going off. But in that dream, I didn't understand as much as I do now because I had a secondary dream that filled in some of the gaps. In the secondary dream, I had two soldiers knock on my front door, and they came in and they said, "I want to talk to your brother." And one of the soldiers who was saying this was about 6.5 to 7 feet tall, and he was beautiful looking. And he came in and he sat on our couch, and I said, "Well, okay, let me go get my brother." My brother, by the way, doesn't live with me, and I believe he was meaning I need to give a message to the brethren. I believe this was an angel of the Lord, by the way. So he was sitting on the couch, and my daughter, who's 8 years old, went and started giggling and tickling him, and he was playing with her. He was very friendly. The dream showed that he was friendly. He wasn't an infiltrator. But he was dressed in camouflage. And so when he was sitting on the chair, I asked him, I said, "So can you tell me what's coming?" And he said, "Yeah." And, Doug, let me just say it real quick, because I know I want to get emails, and I'm going to follow up on this. I'm going to do a write-up on it. He said, "Yeah." Let me tell you verbatim what he said. I said, "Do you know what's coming?" And he said, "Yes, they're going to nuke Montana." And I said, "Excuse me, did you just say Montana?" And then he started explaining it, but my daughter in the dream was giggling, and I couldn't hear him clearly. But what I did pick up was he said, "There's going to be a mishap and an event in Montana." Okay, so when I woke up, I was thinking, where in the world would that be? So I got out the map, and I looked in Montana, and in Great Falls, Montana is Malmstrom Air Force Base, and they're one of the wing commanding control centers of, I believe, 300 or 400 silos that are in the ground. In my first dream, when I saw the flash, where I live, according to the map, Great Falls is to the right of me, almost laterally. So what does that mean? Does that mean a big one? No. He was saying a mishap or an event's going to happen. And so I'm wondering if it's going to be a tactical one on one of the silos or an event at the base, or it's going to involve something that has to do with the command center in Great Falls. And I'll stop with that because I see that we're out of time. But that event is going to play a role in events in the future.
Nathan, I do hope I hope you're wrong, but I'll tell you something. You never cease to amaze and inform us. God bless you, my friend. We are out of time. Thank you for your hard work, your research, your dedication, your love of the Lord, and certainly you're a blessing to us. Nathan, we're out of time. God bless, my friend.
Thank you. God bless.
All right.